The Human from a Dungeon by its director. Chapter 91. Thunra Grantuf. Adventurer level 23, Orc Nilisonian. The cold air ran up my spine as I stood in front of the altar home trying to work up the courage to knock. It had been a few weeks since the first time I'd retrieved Nick for training, and Yilda had told me that I could come by whenever, but my nerves kept getting the best of me. The only time people like it when you show up at the crack of dawn is when you're making them money. The reason for my nerves had changed, though. At first, I was worried Yilda'd hit me. Now I just don't want her to dislike me. It's a silly boy's crush, and I know it. But controlling this kind of feeling is like trying to wrangle greased-up hissers. Things get slippery. I took a deep breath to steady myself and looked up at the sun shyly peeking out over the horizon. Or maybe I'm seeing it like that, 'cause I'm the one that's shy. I released my breath with a quiet sigh, steeled my nerve, and knocked on the door. Gently, it swung open almost immediately, and Yilda regarded me with a smug expression. "Well, well, well," she said, "look who finally got up the courage to knock." Wait, how long you been standing there?" I asked. "I wasn't standing here. I was in the kitchen preparing breakfast." "Then how'd you—" "I'm very fast, Thunra. Anyway, come on in and grab a seat." I'm just here." "To pick up Nick, yes, I know. They're not up yet, though, and I don't get paid to wake them up." "I'll wake 'em up," I said with a grin. "Just get in here and plop your ass on a chair," she ordered, moving to the side to let me through. "Yes, ma'am." I squeezed past her and heard the door close behind me. I walked to the table, mindful of her nearly overwhelming presence behind me, and did as I was told. The chair was a little small for me, but it's hard to find a chair that fits someone my size. Wonder how guys as big as the High Chief manage it. The smell of an excellent breakfast wafted from the fire counter, but I took my mind off my stomach by looking around the house. It was shockingly normal, as if it hadn't even heard of the two legendary members of one of the most powerful clans to ever exist that called this place home. Way nicer than anywhere I'd ever lived, but much less gold and gems than I was expecting. "Nice place you got here," I said as casually as I could. "Thanks," Yilda replied as she began working on the food again. "It's been a great retirement home." "Glad to hear it. Actually, now that you bring it up, do you mind if I ask you a question?" I asked. "You just did," she laughed, making my heart flutter dangerously. "Besides that one, I mean—" "Sure. I heard a lot of stories about you and your husband. Dangerous gangs broken up, massive monsters brought low. You all did great work. Why'd you two decide to retire?" "Well, I retired because we were pretty well off, and I was pregnant with Nash. The thought of having my child be raised by someone else always rubbed me the wrong way," she said as she continued cooking. "Plus, I never really enjoyed the work. Don't get me wrong, it had its charms, but it was a little too reminiscent of my childhood more often than not. Becoming a pampered housewife sounded like a nice change of pace. So I jumped at the opportunity to collect my pension when it came up." "Fair enough," I chuckled. "And your husband?" "Oh, that little shit just retired from the big jobs," she laughed. "Too much energy and courage to actually retire from adventuring work. There were a couple times I caught him sneaking into the dungeon, too. Fought about it even. Seems stupid now." "I don't think it's stupid, Mom," I said. "If you knew then what you know now, sure, but you didn't, so it isn't." "I suppose, and he was being an idiot by sneaking into the dungeon by himself. But then, that's one of the reasons I fell in love with him. He was so damn certain of himself at all times," she laughed wistfully, "and even with enough confidence for a team of adventurers, he was humble enough to fall for a homeless orphan like me." "Is he the one that got you into adventuring?" "No, but he's the one who helped me get good at it. Before him, I was a solo act, mostly because I couldn't really trust anyone to have my back, but also because I didn't want to give anyone a chance to put a knife there." I nodded sagely. A story I'd heard 1,000 times. A hard life makes it hard to trust soft things. One day I snagged what was supposed to be a simple herb-gathering job. Mosilia flowers, very rare and difficult to get to, but the pay was very good. Too good, as it turns out. I climbed a mountain, slipped past a basilisk, navigated a cave filled with beasties, and got the flowers only to have the client turn out to be a vampire and the quest turn out to be a trap. Whoa, really? I asked, dumbfounded. The guild didn't handle the particulars back then. No, they didn't. And what almost happened to me is why they do nowadays. As fortune would have it, though, that vampire is the reason I met Mercus. He had been investigating a string of disappearances that led him to the very same vampire that intended to make me a victim. He crashed through the door just as the vampire had its hand on my neck, zipped across the room, and relieved the vampire of her arm in a flash, she chuckled. I was dumbfounded for a moment, stuck in a trance as the two of them clashed in front of me. I'd seen plenty of fights before, but I'd never seen anyone move that fast. The strength on display was stunning as well. I vividly remember Mercus ripping a brick from the fireplace to bludgeon the vampire's skull. More to be damned. She took the pan off of the fire and started adding seasonings to it. The vampire started regenerating, of course, but by then I'd come to my senses. Mercus, being the confident idiot that he was, didn't bring any way to incinerate the damn thing with him. So I used a fireball. It was the only spell I knew at the time, and it wasn't particularly strong, but it did the job. Then he asked you to join him. Nope, the burning vampire set the manor on fire. I got hit by some debris, but Mercus managed to get me to safety. He came to check on me the next day, and that's when he asked me to join him. That could be seen as being pretty romantic, I chuckled. I thought so too. He was the first person to see me for me. Gods, I had such a crush on him. It sent me over the moon when he confessed that he shared my feelings. Mercus was and remains my closest partner and confidant. I'll never love another like I loved him. And there it was. The fluttering had died out and was replaced with a sting. I could try to argue, ask her if that's what he wanted for her, say that he'd want her to be happy and move on with her life. But as my dad would say, who the hells do I think I am? She's at peace with her situation, and I'll be damned to 1,000 hemorrhoids before I trample over that. Dunno what makes a man fall for a woman who's way out of his league, but I think that doctors should find and cure the cause. Glad this weren't my first crush, or I'd have made a damn fool out of myself. Instead, I sat there with a smile on my face, internally crushing the stupid feelings I had, until they were deader than Mercus. I'm glad you two were able to find each other, I said. So what's for breakfast? Ground meat, eggs and tubers, she replied. Not sure there's going to be enough excess to fill up a mountain like you, though. Don't worry about that, I laughed. Best not to train on a full stomach anyway. There's a good chance you'll lose it. Lose what? Nash asked as he walked into the room. Yulk and Nick followed after him, and they all took their places at the table. The few weeks of hand-to-hand training had built the human up nicely, but he still looked as tired as a half-drowned bird. Guess he wasn't much of a morning person. You excited about training today? I asked with a grin. Can't train today. Gotta leave for school, he replied. Huh? We received a letter from High Chief Ulamak last night, Yulk explained. We'll be boarding a magic cart that should be arriving at the guild today at noon, and then we'll be traveling non-stop to Kirkenar. I raised my eyebrows at the sork as Yilda placed a plate in front of me. Thank you, I bowed a little. You're welcome. The rest of you can get your own, she said as she took a seat with her own plate. The three boys rose and walked over to the still steaming pan. I waited for Yilda to take the first bite, and then I dug in. It was God's damned good, but weird as all hells at the same time. It took a second for my mouth to decide that it liked it. Whoa, I said, this is awesome. How'd you make this? Like I told you, it's just ground meat, eggs, and tubers, she chuckled. Glad you like it, though. Tubers? Like the veggie the dwarves eat? I asked. Yep, Nick needs vegetables as part of his diet, so I've been experimenting. I'll be damned, I said as the boys returned to the table. It's really good, Nick said as he took a bite. Nash looked at his food and bit his lip a little. Yilda noticed and turned to stare at her eldest boy. He took a deep breath and released it with a sigh. I've made a decision, he said. I'm going to be staying here. Yeah, we know, Nick chuckled through his food. Huh? Nick and I spoke on this at length and decided that even if you attempted to accompany us, we would convince you to stay, Yulk explained. The saga of Nima and Nash has been waiting a long time to begin, and it would be a shame to place the strain of distance upon your courtship so early. But you can help me with expanding your room, Yilda interrupted. Yeah, but the thing with the fee... You'll still be able to go play with the fair folk this summer. I plan on hiring some laborers so we can get it done as fast as possible. You can use my room while yours is being renovated, Yulk added. All right, Nash nodded. I'll take on some jobs to help pay the laborers. Nah, you focus on the women in your life, I said. I'll send some money over. Call it a wedding present. I don't need anybody's coin, Yilda argued. Sure, but even with the maximum pension you can get from the guild, you'll have to dip into your food fund. I winked at her. If the other foods you come up with are even half as good as this is, it would be a crime against civilization to interrupt your experiments. I think you overestimate the cost of laborers. Yeah, maybe, but I still want to do something nice for y'all for putting up with my early morning visits. I'm not exactly poor either, Nash said, then chuckled. I'll gladly take your money, though. Pretty sure Nima's mom isn't going to be able to put up a dowry. Wasn't even going to bother to ask for one, so the extra coin would probably do us some good. Urella's financial situation isn't her fault, Yilda sighed. The Maxim clans had a terrible run of luck, and Agurno being a piece of shit didn't help things. Ulomak's brother, I asked. Yes, he romanced poor Urella and convinced her to move here with him while he played with the dungeon. Urella had Nima, then a year later Agurno got another woman pregnant. With Alern, right? That's right. The Maxim clan's hierarchs couldn't afford to retrieve Urella after some bad luck with investments. She's been stuck here ever since, trying to make a living the best she can. Then he has the nerve to promise to raise both children, ignores Nima for the better part of his time here, then fucked off 4 or 5 years ago and hasn't been back since. I swear if I ever see that bastard again, I'll castrate him with his own knee bones. That'd be a fight I'd love to see, I chuckled, then grew serious. Should I send the money to Urella instead? She would return to sender, Yilda shook her head. The Maxims have a thing against receiving charity, and Urella is a Maxim through and through. She'd rather die than get a hand out. I, on the other hand, wouldn't mind at all, Nash said with a grin. If I remember right, doesn't the thing against getting charity only count for people outside the family? Can't I give her the coin after the wedding? I don't recall, but you'd best bring it up with Nima before you go making any bold decisions, Yilda said, narrowing her eyes. Apparently, you and bold decisions pair poorly. Nash fell silent, but Nick and Yulk chuckled. I was confused for a moment, then I remembered that Nash had proposed to Nima out of the blue, in front of everyone at the guild. It brought a smile to my face as I finished my food. What do you mean? Nash asked, pretending to be ignorant. You know damn well what I mean, boy, Yilda said. Gods, you're lucky Nima forgave you, or I'd have beat your ass to the ocean and back. Now shut up and finish your food. Yes, Mum. All done, Nick grinned. It was absolutely delicious. Thank you, Nick, Yilda said with a beaming smile. The human took my empty plate with him to the sink and returned to the table. Soon after, Nash, Yulk, and Yilda finished their meals too. Nash took the dishes to the sink, looking like a stricken pupper. So, do you think I could catch a ride with y'all? I asked. Are you sure? It's a non-stop journey, Yulk said. It's bound to get uncomfortable. Magic arts are both fast and luxurious, I chuckled. It won't take that long to get to Kirkana, and we'll have plenty of room to get a good nap in. If you'd rather travel on your own, though, I get it. Don't want to be a bother. No, I'd be happy to have you along. A pair of my pupils, Yini and Nemora, will be traveling with us, and I've been rather nervous about their safety, Yulk admitted. Nick and I can probably handle it if we get attacked, but more security will bring me peace of mind. That poor girl, Yilda whispered with a small sigh. What? Yulk asked. Nothing, dear. Just thinking about how they're likely already at the guild hall waiting for you. Oh yes, you're probably right. I suppose we should get going. I'll come with to see you off, Nash said. We all stood, and the boys said goodbye to their mom. Hugs and kisses on the cheek were exchanged, and watching them made me miss my own mom. Then the three of them were out the door, but I paused in the doorway. Take care of yourself, Mrs. Alter, I said with a soft smile. You too, Thunra, she replied with a smile of her own. I turned to follow her sons, glad that my heart wasn't fluttering anymore. Chapter 92. Nick Smith, Adventurer Level 9, Human American. We made our way through the village as the early morning sun tried its best to drive away the chill. As we approached the Adventurers Guild, Yinny and Nimura ran up to greet us. Catalina, who must have come to see her friends off, stood near the entrance and watched us. "About time you showed up," Yinny poked Yulk in the chest. "We've been waiting for you." "Ah, yes, Mother suspected as such," Yulk said with a patronizing smile. "I nearly argued with her because the magic art isn't due until noon. Then I realized that you are likely excited at the prospect of attending an actual school." "Yeah, the school's why she's excited," Nimura said sarcastically. I struggled not to sigh at how close Nimura was standing to me. The hints that she was dropping weren't exactly subtle. It had been going on since we'd returned to Nuleva. Unfortunately, she had opted for a passive-aggressive approach to flirtation, standing or sitting closer to me than expected or necessary, staring at me when she thinks I can't see her, laughing a little too hard at my jokes. The type of micro-flirting that one can only engage or ignore. If I actively spoke of my disinterest, she would hide behind the shield of weaponized ignorance. Of course, she's just standing there. She's just laughing at my jokes. She's just looking in my general direction. She's not flirting or displaying interest whatsoever, and I must be vain to think otherwise. It's not the first time I've encountered this particular form of passive aggression. Cassandra's best friend, Emily, starting doing things like this about a month after Cass and I started dating. Instead of ignoring the situation and letting Cass handle it, I had pulled the White Knight routine and confronted Emily about her behavior. The resulting drama cost Cass and I a couple of friends and nearly broke us up. It's entirely possible that I'm projecting a falsely toxic personality upon Nimura because of my past experience with Emily. It's also possible that this is unfair to Nimura and she simply doesn't know any better ways to flirt with people. I couldn't help but be a little upset that I couldn't simply tell her no and be done with it, though. "There's a chance that the magic art might get here early," Nash said. "Let's head in. I want to get Nick's level tested again." "Really?" I asked. "Yeah, let's see the results of your training," Thunra beamed. "I can tell you the results. I learned spear punch and knife hand. I also leveled up time dilation, dash, and preternatural evasion." "Leveled up?" Nimura asked. "Nick has an ability that allows him to see a list of his skills. Through this, we discovered that certain skills, which we previously believed simply got better with familiarity, are actually level-based," Yulk explained. "Oh, I see. Do the levels towards your adventurer level?" "We don't know. In a more controlled environment, we might be able to find out. But it would seem that increasing the levels of a skill happens to be a bit temperamental." "You can say that again," I complained. "Everything we went through and they only just now leveled up." "It still takes the rest of us longer," Nash growled. "Now, if you're done bitching and moaning, let's get in and get you tested." "But what if I'm not done bitching and moaning?" I asked with a grin. Nash shoved me forward as Yulk, Thunra, and I laughed. We entered the guild, walked straight up to Nima. Without even asking what we wanted, she reached under the counter and pulled out the... "You know, I just realized that I don't even know what this thing is called," I said, gesturing toward the box. Yulk, Nash, and Thunra shared a glance but remained silent. The type of silence that indicated ignorance, which made me feel a lot better about waiting this long to ask. Nima looked at the four of us and shook her head with a smile. "This is the Kuraguard Interface Device, or CID for short," Nima explained with a light chuckle. "You're the first non-employee that I've heard ask about it." "Odd," Yulk interjected. "I wonder if there is some sort of psychological manipulation effect on the device that dissuades curiosity. Or whenever the box comes out, people are just thinking about other things." Nash rolled his eyes. "Levels have a high career impact." "I suppose that could be true as well." Thunra chuckled at my brother's conversation as Yulk gave Nima my adventurer ID card. She plugged it into the box, and the handprint appeared after a familiar light show. I steeled myself, the memory of nearly being killed by this damn thing fresh in my mind, and placed my hand on the light. Instead of searing pain, a light tingle passed through my hand, and I breathed a sigh of relief. A moment later, the status screen changed slightly. Not knowing what it said, I glanced between Yulk and Nima. Yulk looked like he was stifling a laugh. Well, I'll be damned. Level 11, Thunra said loudly, clapping me on the back. 2 levels, Yini asked, shocked. Nash growled, son of a bi... Careful, Yulk interrupted, still struggling to keep his composure. Mom adopted him, remember? Oh, shut up, you know what I meant. What's the problem? Thunra asked. He's been working just as hard as the rest of us. That's the problem, Nash sighed. He's working as hard as we are, but gaining new skills, spells and levels much faster than we can. It's frustrating. Oh sure, I get where you're coming from, but there's a couple things to take into account here. First off, he ain't the same species as we are. Maybe that's why he's got an advantage, or maybe that advantage comes with some disadvantages that we don't know yet. Second, he may not have to work as long as you, but he's got to work just as hard, so it ain't like he's getting these levels for free. Third, you aren't in competition. His strength boosts your own, Thunra explained with a shrug. I can see the view from your hill, but I think you're looking in the wrong direction. Nash scowled, then looked at Nima, who was nodding sagely in agreement with Thunra. We stood in silence for a moment as Nash processed everything. Finally, he let out a big sigh. I guess you're right, he shook his head. I'm probably just upset that it took so damn long for me to get to this point. And what do we do when we're in the wrong? Nima asked patronizingly. Sorry, Nick, he said quietly. Did you say something, darling? Please accept my humblest apologies for taking my frustrations out on you, Nick, he said at a level of volume that could only be described as sarcastic. I hope that one day I can be granted the boon of your forgiveness. That's better, Nima smiled with an equal measure of sarcasm. Nima gave me my ID and I absent-mindedly passed it back to Yulk. It had finally happened. I'd caught up to Nash in levels. Does that mean I'm as strong as he is? His size alone made that difficult to believe. Let's grab a place to sit before it fills up in here, Thunra suggested. Anyone want breakfast? My treat. The girls quickly agreed, and we picked one of the large tables to sit at. My mind barely registered that it was the very same one we had chosen to sit at the night Nash had made a fool of himself by proposing to Nina. I was so preoccupied that I almost didn't notice that Nimora had once again chosen the seat on my right as well. Nash and I were both level 11. Not that I would have to, but I doubted that I could actually take him in a fight. My burly brother definitely had more fighting experience than I did, and even after all my training and leveling up, I felt like if I didn't get a lucky shot in, he'd wipe the floor with me. Even Yulk would probably wreck me if it came down to it. The power of my spells weren't anything to scoff at, but the variety that Yulk can use would likely give him the win in a duel of magic. He probably has spells that would give him the win even if I were to use my physical advantage against him. So then, what's the point of the levels exactly? I'm 4 levels above Yulk and doubt my ability to beat him. I'm the same level as Nash, but not even close to his equal in a fight. Yet Thunra, being several levels above my own, could also wipe the floor with all 3 of us in a real fight without even breaking a sweat. I had seen people place importance on levels. They even had phrases like over 10s and over 20s, denoting an obvious difference between the two. Yet here I sat, a brand new over 10, who didn't really notice a difference in my actual ability to fight. Maybe Nash was right to be upset. He was definitely right about one thing, though. I'd put in work, but it had come easier to me than it had to him. He had actually been forced to put his life at risk to gain the skills and experience that he has. I'd gained most of mine in training. I absent-mindedly listened to the conversation around me. The girls were talking about their hopes for the school, and Yulk was desperately trying to temper their expectations and them back to reality. Nash and Thunra were barely listening, seemingly focused on me. You know, Nick, you've done real good with your training. Thunra interrupted the girls, who quickly fell silent. Maybe you got an advantage being a human. Maybe you don't. Either way, there ain't another soul in this village who could have kept up with me in the ring like you did. We all sat silently for a moment while I tried to figure out how to reply. Thank you, I said. I've done martial arts before, though, back in my world. You deserve the compliment, Nick, Nash sighed. I was being unfair earlier. It's hard to see someone surpass you, and you're well on your way to doing that. Hells, you probably already have. No way, I replied, shocked by Nash's attitude shift. If we fought for real, you'd kick my ass. Maybe, but it would be a close thing. And it would depend on your confidence going into the fight. You're close enough to my level of skill with weaponry that I have nothing left to teach you. And on top of that, you have unarmed expertise and magic. You think that after your training with Thunra, I can still take you in a fist fight? Are you saying you can't? Of course not. Not if you put any sort of effort into it. Sure, I know how to throw a punch and deflect, but I don't have any skills that would let me keep up with you or Thunra. Then there's the magic thing. I can't do magic at all, not a single fucking spell. And I've learned the hard way from sparring with Yulk that magic isn't something to scoff at. He's right, Thunra added. If a Sorc gets a spell off before you get close enough to engage them, you'll be lucky to live through the experience. Yeah, and on top of that, you're about to be on your way to hone your skills in magic, Nash said. It probably won't be long before you no longer need Yulk and I for combat support. We'll still accompany you, though, Yulk chuckled. Extra bodies are always a boon in a fight. Additionally, we know more about this world than you do. I don't know what to say, I replied. Thank you. Thunra, who was sitting to my left, clapped his massive hand onto my back. The group returned to their discussions, and I returned to my thoughts. A lot of the anxiety that had been building up in my gut had suddenly faded away, and I found myself finally feeling excited for what's to come. I wondered what the Magic Academy would be like. I'd seen a few movies and shows that featured similar settings, but the High Chief had made it sound like this one wasn't going to be nearly as grand as most of those were. I almost chuckled at the mental image of learning new and powerful spells in the back of a shed. Before I knew it, it was nearly noon. We left the guild and waited outside for the arrival of the Magicart. Not long after, a large, harnessless carriage rolled up in front of the building. The wooden portions of the Magicart were painted dark green and had golden inlays that glimmered in the sun. 4 lanterns were installed on the top of the carriage, but they weren't lit. There was also a place for a driver, occupied by an orc in a scout uniform. Magicart for Yulk and Nick, the driver announced. That would be us, Yulk said. We would like to take 3 more with us. Is that acceptable? Yes, sir. Please board with your party. We will be leaving shortly. The driver hopped down, opened the door for us, then walked into the guild. I raised an eyebrow and Nash laughed. Probably has to take a leak, he said. All right, brothers, I won't be along to keep you out of trouble this time. Don't do anything that will make Mom kill you. We won't, Yulk replied, then grinned. Probably. Good luck with Nima, I said. The girls said their goodbyes to each other, and Thunra shook Nash's hand. Then we helped the girls load their bags and threw our sacks next to them. We climbed into the Magicart as the driver came back and waved at Nash and Catalina as we began to drive away. Next stop, Kirkana, the driver said. Chapter 93. Nick Smith, Adventurer Level 11, Human American. There wasn't much to do on the drive to Kirkana except nap. I awoke as the Magicart lurched to a stop in front of a building that looked remarkably similar to a painted warehouse. Before I could even finish my double take, the driver opened the door and everyone started climbing out. Yini and Nimura looked around in awe as Thunra grabbed our bags from the back of the Magicart and returned them to their rightful owners. As each of us grabbed our bags, we received a handshake. Thanks for the lift, Thunra said when it was Yulk's turn. What'll you do now? I asked. Well, I'm hoping they've reserved my room at my favorite inn, Trusca's, if you were wondering. Once I get settled in, I'll take on some jobs. I was under the impression that you had plenty of money, Yulk said. Yeah, got more than I know how to spend. I just like the work, Thunra chuckled. But who knows, after all this education talk, I figure I might open a fight school. Brawling's usually passed down from parent to child, which, I don't know, hurts relationships, you know? Better to hate a teacher than your mom or pa, right? I suppose so. Yeah, anyways, send me a message when you'll got some more free time. Training's far from over. The massive orc winked at me, then laughed. I sighed as Thunra walked away, laughing the whole time. I couldn't wait to forget about melee fighting for a while. Ten had been working overtime to make sure that I felt as little of Thunra's training as possible, but it still sucked. The magic art continued on its way, and we walked up to the entrance of the Magic Academy. The doors had recently been replaced, and a new coat of brown paint had been slapped over the exterior, but you could still tell this building had seen better days. It looked more like a rich person's warehouse than a school for the study of magic. Still, learning magic in an oversized shack is better than not learning magic at all. I pushed the door and it opened without resistance, allowing us to walk inside. The interior didn't look much better than the exterior, but it was cleaner than I expected. It also smelled like recent renovations had just occurred. Sawdust, paint, and other construction-related scents lingered in the air around us. "Welcome to the Kirkana Academy of Magic," a female gnome said as she descended the main staircase. "I am Headmaster Malura Grinzor, and you must be—" "Pleasure to meet you, Headmaster." Yulk bowed slightly. "I am Yulk of Clan Alta, and these are my students, Nick Smith, Nimora Clawlin, and Yinny Amagron." "I see," she said, raising an eyebrow. "You're the first teacher who has brought their own students." "Just as well. Along with these three, we have only 20 students." "How many teachers are there?" I asked. "5. "Only 5?" Yulk asked. "Did any of my recommendat—" "Yes," Malura interrupted with a sigh. "Both of them were approved and, with some difficulty, contacted. They both of them accepted. Olmira has already arrived and made herself at home. Lord Visimiro is still en route." "Excellent." I was glad to hear that Olmira was going to be a teacher and wondered who Lord Visimiro was. The name sounded familiar, but I was drawing a blank. Malura gestured for us to follow her and began giving us a tour of the school. We entered a few of the classrooms and had a look around. Each classroom had a lectern and 15 seats with small tables next to them. I had expected desks, but these were armchairs. They looked really comfortable too. "As you can see, we are currently a little over-furnished," Malura sighed. "These rooms are where you will begin class unless told otherwise, but I'm sure you won't spend much time here." "Why not?" Yinny asked. "Magic is best taught in practicum. Lectures are useful for establishing the basic concepts of some of the more complicated spells, but most people learn best by doing. Let's move on." Malura then led us further down the hallway and out the rear entrance. We entered a large yard with neatly trimmed grass and a high wall. Several groups of strawman targets were spread throughout the yard, all facing the back wall. "This is where the practical learning will take place," she said, gesturing toward the targets. "The walls are reinforced with glyphs, and we have plenty of targets, so there's no need to hold back. Using your magic on other students is completely forbidden, of course, with a zero-tolerance policy. Expulsion is the minimum penalty if this rule is violated, but criminal charges may be applied in egregious circumstances. This includes healing spells as well. If someone is injured, one of the faculty will heal them. Finally, a member of faculty must accompany any students who wish to use this training yard. Any questions?" Yinny, Nimora, and I glanced at each other, then shook our heads. "Yes," Yulk said, chuckling. "When will classes start, and how will they function?" "Oh yeah," Yinny whispered to herself. "We begin lessons the day after Lord Visimiro arrives. Each day will be split into 5 periods, and each student will receive a schedule that will tell them which classrooms they will need to be in, at which times. Each period will be with a different teacher," Malura explained. "This is, of course, subject to change as things develop. We're still in the experimental stage, so there's going to be plenty of developments and changes to look forward to." "Are there accommodations for students and staff?" "Yes. High Chief Ulamak has sequestered an inn across the road that has been struggling to pay its debts. It has been converted into a dormitory and cafeteria for the students. The top floor of the academy has living space for the teachers. Both of these amenities are available on an as-needed basis, of course. Will your students be requiring room and board?" "Yes," Yulk answered. He began to explain our situation to the headmaster in more detail, and I took a closer look around our surroundings. The wall was very tall, probably something like 12 or 15 feet, but there were still some buildings peeking over it as if they were curious. The academy must be fairly close to High Chief Ulamak's offices. The outskirts of the city looked like any other village, But as you got further in, things began to look more metropolitan. I looked at the academy again and realized that we were probably near an industrial area, unless the building didn't actually used to be a warehouse, which would be an absolute shock. Then the girls caught my eye. While my first impression of the Kirkana Academy of Magic was a disappointed one, Yini and Nimora seemed absolutely enamored. Both of them were zoned out, studying the area around us. None of Nuliva's buildings were quite as large as the warehouse academy, let alone the massive structures surrounding it. They were no skyscrapers, but to two young girls from a village, these buildings were an impressive feat of architecture. "Okay, I understand," Malura said. "Take your students to the inn and find them a room. I'll have the necessary paperwork ready for you when you get back. Then we'll discuss what's going to be required of your position." "Yes, Madam Headmaster," Yulk bowed a little. "Okay, children, come along." Yini and Nimora whipped their heads toward the chuckling orc angrily. Before they could start chewing him out, though, he began walking back toward the academy as quickly as he could. The girls stared after Yulk in disbelief, and then the three of us followed after him. They gave him an earful as we journeyed through the underwhelming academy and across the street to an inn that didn't look much better. It made me wonder if these were the slums of Kirkana. However, the inn took me by surprise by looking much better on the inside than the outside. The entrance doubled as a tavern-style restaurant, and there were several people milling around. An elf behind the counter greeted us as we approached. Yulk greeted her back as I politely ignored stares and double-takes. "We have some students of the academy that need rooms," Yulk explained with a smile. "Oh, good. We'd love to have more guests," the elf said with a grin. "3 rooms?" "No, 2 will be fine," Yulk replied. "I thought we could double up, if that's okay," Yini said. "It would save some space." "We have plenty of rooms," the woman smiled politely, "and none of them have 2 beds. "Wait, where's Nick staying?" Nimora asked. "Nick and I will be staying at the Marfix Inn," Yulk explained. "It should be relatively nearby." "What? How can you possibly afford that?" "We get to stay there for free," I answered. "We saved the owner's nephew?" "Wasn't it his son?" Yulk asked. I don't recall. Anyway, we saved the owner's family member and now we can stay there for free." "Well, that's not fair," Nimora pouted. "From an existential point of view, you're correct," Yulk chuckled. "However, it is a reward for a good deed that we've done, at much risk to our own health, might I add. Plus, our stay at the Marfix will make room for more students and teachers, and Nick won't be gawked at quite as often." Nimora looked around us and went quiet. The stares weren't new to me, and I'd been ignoring them, but I would be lying if I said it didn't bother me. Nimora must have been in her own little world to not have noticed. "Our lodgings may not be quite as luxurious as the Marfix Inn, but we hold ourselves to a very high standard," the elf interjected. "I promise that you'll enjoy your stay." "How much does it cost?" Yini asked. "It's free for students of the Magic Academy. We get compensated by the government for each student that stays here. Same with your meals, by the way. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner are available to every student, free of charge." "That's probably going to change at some point, so you'd better make sure to take advantage of it while you can," Yulk said. "I think they'll probably just add it to the cost of tuition," I argued. "Perhaps. Regardless, let's get the girls settled in and then get checked in at the Marfix." The receptionist gave Yini and Nimora their keys, and we carried their bags up to their rooms. The girls decided to stay behind and see if they could meet some of the other students, while Yulk and I went to the Marfix Inn. We asked the receptionist for directions, and we arrived after a short walk. The luxury of the Marfix greeted us warmly, and it didn't take long to get settled in. Yulk needed to go back to the academy to do paperwork and learn more about his role as a teacher, but I opted to stay behind and relax a bit. After a swim, sauna, shower, and meal, I returned to my room and kicked my feet up. To be honest, I was experiencing a bit of inner turmoil. Part of me was excited about learning magic, but part of me was very, very nervous. What if this doesn't live up to my expectations? Or if I don't live up to everyone else's expectations? It would really suck if I only learn 1 or 2 spells. On the other hand, what if I learn a crazy number of powerful spells and further ostracize myself? The confession Nash had made before we left had left an impression on me, even if it was a small one. If I end up becoming the strongest fighter ever, what right do I have to ask my brothers to accompany me on what may turn out to be an extremely dangerous quest? Finding my way back home on my own would be difficult, but with overwhelming firepower, it would be almost irresponsible for me to even consider bringing them with me. Right? What if they die because of me? Could I trade their lives to return to Cass? Do I have that right? Yulk's assessment of our situation came into play as well. I don't know this world, and I'll need a guide on my adventure. Someone who can read, at the very least. My brothers promised to help me see this through, and they probably knew better than I could how dangerous this might be. Would it be right to force them to break that promise? Faced with the anxieties of an uncertain future, I sighed. The next leg of my quest would be to meet with the court of the fair folk and request their aid. After that, who knows? Maybe the journey won't be as treacherous as I'm making it out to be. Maybe Yulk and Nash will be able to accompany me without any fear of getting hurt. Or maybe it will be so dangerous that our lives will be on the line every step of the way. But if I get strong enough, I might be able to protect them. Nash probably won't like having to rely on me for fights, but it's better than the alternative. They can guide me and support me, and I can make sure they make it home okay. I just need to get a lot stronger. Chapter 94. Nick Smith, Adventurer Level 11, Human American. The chair I sat in and watched as the other students took their seats was very comfortable. Such a seat was much appreciated, given how few and far between such comforts tend to be. Even with my constant stay in the Marfix Inn, I knew better than to take the small comforts for granted. The schedule I'd been given had Yulk as my first teacher, then Elmira, Mr. Descu, Mr. Tainora, and finally Lord Visimiro. I wanted to ask Yulk about Visimiro, but he had arrived after I fell asleep and had left before my wake-up call. Then, when I'd arrived to class, he'd hurried me to my seat, which prompted me to give up and just wait to meet him. Our class was comprised of a total of 4 students, an elf, 2 orcs, and me. The elf was a bit on the older side, but the orcs appeared to be around the same age as Yini and Nimora. I hadn't exactly been asking people about their ages, but it would be safe to assume they were all about the same age as me. "Welcome to class, my prospective pupils," Yulk said with a grin. "As I'm sure you're aware, my name is Mr. Alta. In this class, we will be covering the foundations of magic, specifically concepts and practices that are shared by the majority of spells, regardless of caster. Who can give me an example?" The elf raised her hand, and Yulk nodded for her to continue. She explained that conceptualization was an example of a practice shared by all forms of magic. Yulk agreed and launched into a lecture. The orcs were paying close attention to him, but gave me more than a few curious glances. The lecture continued into methods of conceptualization. Yulk didn't say anything I didn't already know, so I let the other students answer questions and sat quietly. My brother noticed my detachment and decided to pick on me. "Conceptualization becomes more or less important depending upon what you are conceptualizing," he said, then looked directly at me. "Nick, which would be more powerful to cast Fireball? Conceptualizing the flame itself, or a fuel source for the flame?" I thought about it for a moment, then realized that I didn't actually know for sure. One would imagine that imagining flames would be better for a spell like Fireball. With a small sigh, I decided to wing it. Well, flames happens when a fuel source begins shedding ions and electrons at a rapid rate, then having them recombine into molecules in a process that produces light and heat, I explained, recalling a random video that I had seen. This process is caused by the fuel source reaching a high enough temperature for it to ignite. If I understand conceptualization properly, then imagining the processes behind a flame would be more effective than imagining the processes behind a fuel source reaching its ignition point. The class stared silently at me with clueless expressions on their faces. I quickly realized that I had gone overboard with my explanation and nearly winced. Yulk, however, recovered rather quickly and cleared his throat. "Well, that explains a lot," he chuckled. "You're correct, though. Imagining the flame is always more potent than imagining the source of the flames. Just as imagining water taking form is more potent than imagining rain. So, if you want to cast a potent fireball, focus on the flames, not the campfire." The rest of the class was spent speaking about the various tactics that mages use to conceptualize their spells. Some mages memorize phrases that help them remember how a spell works. Others keep objects on their person that do the same thing. Most just use the spells enough that they memorize the conceptualizations. Yulk didn't call on me for the rest of class, which I was extremely grateful for. A bell began ringing loud enough to echo throughout the school. Yulk dismissed us, and we traveled to our next class. The other students were grouped together, walking a few feet ahead of me. It would have been insulting had I not been fully prepared for that kind of reaction. After all, I'm a stranger with a strange face in a strange land. Olmira the Eternal greeted us as we entered the class and took our seats. She took an extra moment to say that she was glad to see me again and happy that we had survived our last adventure. This caused more confused glances from my classmates, but the vampire launched into her lesson without further elaboration. My name is Olmira the Eternal. I prefer that you simply call me Olmira, but in formal setting, you may call me Lady Olmira. In this class, we will be learning about glyphs and barriers, she explained. Who can tell me what glyphs are most commonly used for? The elf once again raised her hand and was called on. Glyphs are mostly used for enchantments, but can also be used to lock doors, she said. Olmira squeezed her chin. You're close. Glyphs can be used to make enchantments and to lock doors, yes, but there's a far more common use for them, one that you'll no doubt run into as an adventurer. Any other guesses? Traps? I asked. Correct? Good work, Nick, but please raise your hand in the future, she said with a disarming smile. Yes, Lady Olmira. She picked up on the slight sarcasm in my reply and gave me a small glare. I smiled politely at her, and she continued her lecture on traps. The main points of her lecture were that almost all dungeons have traps, and nearly all of these traps are glyphs. Various governments also keep their confidential records behind trap doors, which also use glyphs. Even consumer industries, like banks and storage services, use glyphs to set traps for unwary robbers. She then explained that glyphs rely on a physical medium that creates a symbol. Clever traps typically disguise their glyphs in ways that are difficult to spot so that they can't be disarmed. I wondered what would happen if someone used invisible ink, but decided to keep my mouth shut. Olmira then moved on to discussing barriers. Barriers use both runes and glyphs. The glyphs that initially create the barrier are intricate and difficult to make, which means that the stones they're carved on are rather expensive. When the stone is activated, a magical barrier covered in runes is created. These runes strengthen the barrier against specific types of ingress. From what I could tell, runes are essentially glyphs made out of magical energy. Both use arcane symbology, but the effects of runes are far more potent than glyphs. But to be effective, runes have to be composed of magical energy, whereas glyphs merely need to be infused with magic. It was a very informative class, but before I knew it, the bell rang, and it was time to go to the next one. We walked in the same formation, but this time my classmates were comfortable enough for some chatter about what we had just learned. Inside the next class was a gnome with a very short desk in front of him. We took our seats, and the gnome cleared his throat. Welcome, my name is Mr. Descu, and I will be teaching you about enchantments, the gnome said. It is a complicated subject with many intricacies and expenses, so most of this class will be lectures rather than practical learning. Mr. Descu did a lot more lecturing than asking questions. He explained that enchantments could be done multiple ways. The first and most common way was with glyphs. However, only a select few glyphs would work with enchanting, and if those glyphs were damaged, the enchantment would no longer function. Another, far more difficult and durable method of enchanting involved invocation. He explained that invocation is a poorly understood school of magic, but invokers explain it as calling upon mystic forces for aid in imbuing an object with certain properties. This particular type of enchantment is very potent, but can only be performed with particularly durable materials. The end result can last the entire career of a normal adventurer, but normal adventurers wouldn't be able to afford it. Blessings were the final method of enchantment that Mr. Descu covered. An extremely rare and potent type of enchantment, a blessing is when a being from another, more powerful plane of existence imbues an object with special capabilities. It's similar in many ways to invocation in chanting, but doesn't require an invoker. My thoughts turned to my cuirass and helmet. The cuirass was probably enchanted with invocations, but the helmet was probably a blessing. I thought about whether or not I should bring this up. Before I figured out how to phrase the question, though, the bell rang. This is when our lunch period was scheduled, and we dutifully walked across the street to get some food. My eyes trailed over the tavern-like lunch area, but couldn't find anyone I recognized. The paper detailing the state-sponsored school lunch mentioned that there were 2 lunch schedules. I wondered when Nimora and Yini would be having theirs. Nimora's affections were annoying, but it was better than being ignored, or whispered about in hushed tones, which happened while I ate. The food wasn't bad, but I'd had a big breakfast and was mostly picking at it. When I saw my classmates finish theirs, I decided that it was time that I'd finished mine. Just in time too, because the bell rang again by the time we'd re-entered the school. Once again, I trailed after my classmates. This time, we passed Yini and Nimora, who waved at me. I waved back, happy to get acknowledged by someone other than teachers. My classmates saw the exchange, but pretended not to notice. It was difficult to tell if it was fear or malice that caused their avoidance, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't beginning to wear thin. "Sit down," a dark grey elf standing at the front of the class said as we entered. Once we were seated, he continued, "My name is Argus Tyanora. I see from your expressions that you were not expecting to be taught by a drow. Thankfully, I was pestered by questions enough today to be able to anticipate yours. No, I am not a subject of the Night Kingdom. No, I was not born in the Night Kingdom. Yes, I have fought against the Night Kingdom. No, I hold no love for any drow other than my wife, children, mother, father, and siblings. I am a level 22 adventuring sorcerer. Those are all of the personal questions that I will answer. You will call me Mr. Tyanora, and I will teach you the tactical applications of magic." The drow had begun to explain how useful tactics were in a fight, when it struck me that he looked remarkably similar to the vampire that I, or 10 I guess, killed in the Empire of Calcuti. The same dungeon that we met Larry the Lich, in fact. I began to wonder what Larry and the kobolds were up to when Mr. Tinora cleared his throat angrily. "Nick the Human," he said sternly, "I realize that you are an adventurer and likely know a good portion of this information. If you wouldn't mind, though, could you at least pretend to pay attention?" "Sorry, sir," I replied. "Actually, come to think of it, Mr. Alter claims that you have an immense reserve of magic. Perhaps a practical demonstration of my lecture is in order." The drow grinned maliciously. "I'm sure you've been sitting in classrooms all day. Come, let's quit to the training yard." Mr. Tyanora opened the classroom door and gestured for us to enter the hallway. He then led us out the rear entrance of the school. After examining a few of the targets, he turned to us and focused on me. "Nick, I want you to fire one of your spells at this group of targets." He gestured toward a cluster of 5 dummies. "Don't worry about holding back. The point is to destroy as many of them as possible. Show us what you've got, human." His last line felt like a challenge and prickled the hairs on the back of my neck. Fine, if that's the way he wants it. I walked up to the firing line, held out my hand, and concentrated. Rapes denewed sack. The well-trimmed grass flattened as a massive blast of wind shot from my hand, pushing me back a step. 3 of the targets immediately disappeared, leaving the furthermost targets on the right and left standing. I turned around and was greeted by looks of awe from my classmates. Mr. Tyanora, however, looked unimpressed. "Quite powerful," he nodded. "Now take down the remainder." I tried and realized that I was out of magic. I took a few deep breaths, but before I could regenerate the magic, Mr. Tyanora tapped me on the shoulder. I turned to look at him and was met with another malicious grin. "And you're dead," he said. "You see, Nick, this is the exact lecture that I was giving. The tactical usage of your magic reserve to ensure that you do not deplete it in the middle of a fight. Or, in this case, at the very beginning of it. Allow me to demonstrate a more effective way to use magic." He turned and walked over to another group of 5 dummies and gestured for us to join him. We did, and he held up his hand. The words came from his mouth so fast that I couldn't even hear them. And 5 powerful yet well-controlled wind spears flew from his hand and destroyed the dummies. There you have it. Mr. Tainora dusted his hands off. All 5 enemies dead, and I still have more in the tank. Tell me, human, what happens if your initial volley misses? Well, I also have training in sword fighting and hand-to-hand combat. How practical. Unfortunately for the rest of us, it is rare for someone gifted with magical potency to also possess an aptitude for physical fighting. Of course, combat is about doing whatever it takes to survive, but it would be better to enter it with as much preparation as possible. Wouldn't you agree? Yes, sir. Excellent. Then I demand that you pay close attention to my lessons and learn to control your magical output with a skill that is borderline surgical. He turned to the other 3 students. It's likely that this human just used the most powerful version of Windspear that you've ever seen. Personally, I've only seen more power on a handful of occasions. However, I assure you that at his current understanding of magical warfare, were we to come to blows, I would be able to defeat him. The same could be said for all of you if you study well. Let us return to class. I followed after Mr. Tainora with mixed feelings. On one hand, he had kind of made a fool out of me. On the other, he had made a really good point and hadn't been overly rude about it. One couldn't even really call it tough love. I also got the feeling that he wasn't lying about being able to kick my ass. Couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something about the way he moved told me that my strikes wouldn't reach him. Guess that makes sense, considering that he's an over 20 like Thunra. The rest of class was spent explaining exactly what had happened on the training field from an educative standpoint. I had spent all of my magic in one powerful attack, and Mr. Tainora had fired 5 smaller spells in rapid succession. He also pointed out that the rapidity with which one can use a spell oftentimes decides the victor of a fight. I paid close attention to the rest of the lecture until the bell finally rang. Letting my frustrations get the better of me, I decided to be the first out the door and lead the pack this time. Instead of hanging back, though, they quickly caught up to me. "Hi, I'm Arl," one of the orcs said. "I'm Nia," the other orc grinned. "That was a really cool spell." "And I am Volus," the elf said hurriedly. "Do you know other spells?" Yeah," I replied, a little shocked. I know Fireball, Ice Javelin, Light, Earthen Dagger, Heal, and Minor Heal." "What's Ice Javelin?" Nier asked. "Exactly what it sounds like. Shoots a javelin made of ice at your target." "What's the difference between Heal and Minor Heal?" Volus asked. "Minor Heal heals other people. Heal only heals me." "Where did you learn all those spells?" Earl asked. "Yeah, Mr. Alter taught me some of them. I learned the rest through trial and error." "How do you know Mr. Alter?" "He's my brother by adoption. Our other brother Nash found me in a dungeon in New Leva." There were many other questions, and I did my best to answer them all as we continued to our next class. It felt good, like I'd passed a hurdle and accomplished something. Our conversation was interrupted when we reached our last class of the day, though. A tall, domineering elf stood outside of the class. "Hello, students," she said. "Due to an incident that occurred this morning, we are reminding all of our students that Lord Visimiro is here at the invitation of High Chief Ulamak and has been vouched for by a member of the illustrious Alta clan. Violence against our teachers will not be tolerated. Please enjoy the class." Confused, we nodded as she stepped aside. "An incident occurred this morning? Violence against the teachers? One of the teachers is a drow, but this is the one that comes with a warning. Just who is this Lord Visimiro?" My classmates looked at me expectantly. I sighed and trepidatiously walked in. I heard the slight pops of 4 mouths opening in shock as we saw who the final teacher was, and realized that one of the mouths was my own. "Nick," the teacher said, his bare skull forming an unnatural smile. "I was wondering when you were going to be in my class." "Larry?" I asked. Chapter 95. Volus, Adventurer level, not applicable, Elf, Kirkanan. "Lari?" Nick asked, dumbfounded. The human's familiarity with the creature helped my heart settle a little, but not by much. Nier and Arl were also taken aback, but they didn't seem to recognize the abomination. I knew what stood before us, though, the epitome of misguided mortal ambition and a testament to the depravity that lurks within us all. My master had allowed me the use of his library whenever I finished my daily duties earlier than expected. Of the vast number of books contained within, only one tome dared to depict the terrible nature of a lich. Even that tome only spoke in allegory and metaphor, so as to protect its reader from the true horrors involved. Surprised to see me? Lord Visimiro chuckled. Yulk recommended me to High Chief Ulamak. Well, that doesn't surprise me, Nick sighed. You agreed, though? Of course, I possess a great deal of knowledge and experience that would benefit a great many. The lich nodded somberly. High Chief Ulamak sent a very respectful delegation who made certain to point this out to me. They effectively guilted me into it. A mortal that wishes to become a lich must subject several victims to extensive tortures and extract specific humors from what little blood remains. The process of this extraction is always fatal, releasing each of the poor victims from their mangled mortal shell. The lich then uses these humors to craft a potion that allows them to escape the notice of the higher ones while they take the next step toward their own damnation. The tome that I read did not specify the number of victims required, but it implied that it was over 100. It also implied that the next step in the process requires twice that number of victims, all of whom had to be children or infants. Anything capable of such terrible acts would be crushed under the weight of their guilt, were they able to feel even a smidge of empathy. So how can this thing be guilted into something? Could this creature be something other than a lich? What about the kobolds? Nick asked. They've achieved a semblance of self-sufficiency. Simith, the kobold you're familiar with, has a rather surprising knack for leadership. With some clear and concise instructions, they should be able to thrive without me for quite some time, the lich explained, then laughed. I can only hope that my instructions were clear and concise enough. Now please take your seats. Nick nodded and unceremoniously plopped himself into one of the chairs. The orcs and I shared a glance and reluctantly followed suit. Our teacher was likely an abomination, but there was little I could do about it. Attacking it would spell my doom, regardless of whether or not I was successful in destroying it, which was quite unlikely. Plus, what if it wasn't actually a lich? Thank you for your prompt attendance, it said with a nod. My name is Lari Visimiro, Lord of the Fallen and King of the Kobolds. With the pronouncement of his title, several facts came together within my mind. Visimiro, as in House Visimiro, the noble house founded by the great Magus Imlor Visimiro the Grand, the most famous gnome to ever live. Lari Visimiro, his son, was one of the greatest healers to ever grace the mortal realm. But it can't be the same Lari Visimiro. A lich can live in perpetuity, but how could someone with such legendary kindness and compassion become such a monstrosity? And how could it dare to show its face here in such a state? Is it counting upon our own kindness and ignorance to avoid punishment for its misdeeds? Or was the great Lari Visimiro cursed somehow and simply resembles a lich? I'm afraid that due to the customs of the unified chiefdoms, you must refer to me as Lord Visimiro, it explained. Of course, I won't do anything if you call me something else, but… The lich trailed off and looked pointedly at the muscular elf sitting behind us. She smiled at our glances with a hint of maliciousness. I noticed the emblem of the Pumos trade union pinned to her shirt. A trade union enforcer. Despite her chosen trade, I felt a sort of kinship with her. Like me, she was an elf surrounded by orcs and worked in a male-dominated field. I wondered if she had felt as much pressure from them during her career as I had in my own. Probably, but whilst I must utilize passive aggression and my wits, she probably just punches anyone that gets too mouthy. Must be cathartic. In this class, I will be teaching you everything that I know about the art of healing, Lord Visimiro explained. However, before we begin our lesson, I feel that my current state of being needs to be addressed. I am a lich. My heart pounded at the confirmation. An obscenity stood before us, intending to teach us the sacrosanct art of healing. What in the hells was happening here? Has the High Chief lost his mind? The color drained from Nier's face, but Earl cautiously raised his hand. Yes? Lord Visimiro asked. Well, Lord, Isle stammered. What's a lich? I appreciate the question. It takes courage to reveal one's ignorance and attempt to correct it. It paused for a moment, as if to gather its words. A lich is the atrocious result of an utterly disgraceful attempt to violate the natural order of life and achieve immortality. He practically spat the words, and the venom in his tone shocked me. Where was this anger coming from? Is he ashamed of what he has done? Near and I shared a quick expression of confusion with each other, but Nick noticed. Lord Visimiro didn't choose to become a lich, Nick explained. It was forced upon him by— Nick, though speaking out of turn, is correct, our teacher interrupted. The story of how I was turned into what I am is a matter for another time, though. We have precious little time together, and plenty to leer. I raised my hand, cutting him off. His attention turned to me, and I stared into the void that his eyes should rest in. Yes? He asked. I'm sorry, Lord Visimiro, but I have to know, I said, gathering my courage. You seem to acknowledge that your existence is an affront to all that is good and right. But, well, why haven't you— I trailed off, too afraid to finish the question. Silence filled the classroom as my classmates stared at me in shock. The only one who had seemed to expect the question was the lich. Tried to end my existence. Lord Visimiro finished my question, then sighed. I hardly see how that's any of your business, but if you must know, I have. Unfortunately, a lich cannot kill itself. I can do nothing that may harm my phylacteries, not even reveal their locations. And damaging my own physical form will only result in my own revival. But that's quite enough, the elf behind me angrily interrupted. Lord Visimiro, please start your lesson. The lich stared at me for a moment, its skull utterly devoid of expression, then played with some papers at its desk. It then stood and began to lecture us on the art of healing. I received some rather unkind glances from my classmates that caused me to blush, but before long they were enraptured by the lesson. I tried to pay attention as Lord Visimiro explained the basic concepts of healing spells, but my thoughts were racing. How could one be forced into lichdom? Even so, why would the High Chief choose them to teach something so sacrosanct? Finally, why am I the only one who seems to be upset by this development? Perhaps I had taken after my master too much. For almost a decade now, I'd served as the butler of Lord Alvintis Maxim, patriarch of the Maxim clan. I'd often been told that his views on right and wrong were much too black and white, but they had always made sense to me. His views on morality were the entire reason I was able to attend this school in the first place. Ever since I revealed my desire to learn magic to him as a young girl, he'd been lamenting how unfair it is to keep me as his butler. He had even queried several mages over the years, hoping to find me a sufficient tutor. They were all either too busy or too greedy, though. When High Chief Ulamak had requested that Lord Maxim invest in this school, my master agreed on the condition that I be accepted. It was a very kind gesture, one which I am utterly unworthy of, but it came with a catch. The Maxim clan is no longer in a position in which to be charitable. Once I achieve competency in magic, I'll return to my master and act as his head of security and advisor of the arcane until my retirement. It's an arrangement that I'm more than happy with, of course, but Lord Maxim still lamented its necessity. The previous head of security had fled her post to elope with Lord Maxim's youngest daughter. A lesser Mir would have had bounty hunters on her tail for her audacity, but he simply wished the young couple well and chose me to fill the position. Things had lined up almost perfectly, in fact. I wondered what my master would do in my position and decided to write him and ask. He will be able to judge the situation better than I ever could. If I'm right to feel this way, he'll explain what I should do about it. If I'm in the wrong, he'll explain why in such a way that will alleviate my ill feelings. Satisfied with my decision, I turned my attention back to the lich and noticed that he was staring at me. Young elf, I realize that you must have a lot on your mind, but it will be difficult to catch up if you lose focus, Lord Visimiro said. Ye young, I stuttered, dumbfounded. The lich tilted its head at me, seemingly confused, then seemed to have a revelation. Ah, my apologies. You must be older than I take you for and unused to being called young, he chuckled. In my defense, though, you are much, much younger than I am. How old are you? Arl asked. Come now, that's hardly relevant to the lesson at hand. Oh yeah, sorry, my lord, I was just curious. Understandable. Truth be told, I am unsure. I have spent quite a long time underground, you see. In dungeons, it is difficult to keep track of whether it is day or night, so I quickly lost track of such things. The calendar has changed as well, so I would have to find a historian to help me figure it out. Frankly, it isn't worth the effort. Suffice it to say that I'm more than a lifetime older than all of you put together. So you'd be Bones anyway. Everyone in the class gave Arl an exasperated expression. Oh, sorry, my lord, Arl said, rubbing his neck. Lord Visimiro gave Arl a pointed look, then continued his lesson. He explained that the efficacy of healing depends greatly upon the caster's knowledge of anatomy and physiology. Then, for Arl's benefit, he explained what anatomy and physiology meant. Like other forms of magic, if one knows exactly what the spell should be doing, the spell will do it better, he said. By better, I mean both faster and more thoroughly. Let's have an example. Who can tell me what a liver does? I reluctantly raised my hand. Yes? The liver balances one's humours, does it not? I asked. That is correct. The Lich nodded happily as Nick raised his hand. Oh, we have another answer. Go ahead, Nick. Balancing the humours is a fair summary, but I have learned several of its specific functions, if you're interested, Nick said, a little shyness seeping into his voice. Of course, go ahead. Nick then explained that one's liver processes all of the blood that leaves one's digestive system. It does several things during its processing, such as regulate amino acids, convert sugar into a form that's easier to store, removing bacteria from the blood, converting ammonia to urea, as well as produce proteins, cholesterol, and bile. Lord Visimiro, Nier, and I were absolutely enraptured by his explanations. IRL was, predictably, confused. Lord Visimiro asked Nick to explain what each of these byproducts were, and the human did his best to do so. He noted that the class in which he learned this information was considered rudimentary by his society's standards, but I had already retrieved my journal and began taking meticulous notes. It occurred to me that one likely had to perform some rather ethically questionable research to learn information like this, but I decided to let it be. It was possible that my reaction toward Lord Visimiro had already made a fool of me, and it's best to only do that once a day if one can help it. Very good, Nick, Lord Visimiro nodded thoughtfully. Thank you for your insight. Now for the example question. If your patient was stabbed in the liver, whose healing would be the most effective? The humans or the elves? Earl raised his hand before everyone else, and the Lich gestured to him. Well, Volus had a good answer, but I think Nick's beat hers, he said. Plus, he's already a pretty powerful mage. His healing's probably top-notch. Good, Lord Visimiro's skull seemed to smile. You're correct in both regards, actually. Having an intricate knowledge regarding the functions of the body will save you from having to cast your healing spells multiple times, but if you have a large reserve of magic, you'll be able to counteract your ignorance. Having both will allow you to heal more people and cast more intricate healing spells. Nick raised his hand. Yes, Nick. Do you know anything about being able to continuously cast minor heal, Lord Visimiro? Continuously cast? As opposed to casting multiple times in quick succession? Yes. I've never heard of such a thing. The Lich tilted its skull. Care to elaborate? I don't think I can, Nick said, rubbing his neck. Not without you, Mr. Alter. Lord Visimiro opened his jaw to reply, but the bell rang before he could say anything. Well, perhaps we should have an after-school meeting then, he laughed. Can I have a volunteer retrieve Mr. Alter, please? I quickly raised my hand, hoping to be able to attend this meeting. Nick seemed to have quite a lot of knowledge, and I couldn't help but want every last bit of it. Thank you for volunteering, Lord Visimiro nodded at me. As for the rest of you, I will see you tomorrow. You're dismissed. Ignoring the curious looks from Isle and Nier, I gathered my things and rushed to Mr. Alter's classroom. I found him at his desk, writing something on a long scroll of paper. Oh yes, he asked. How can I help you? Hello, Mr. Alter. Apologies for the interruption. Lord Visimiro and Nick are having a meeting that requires your attendance, sir, I explained. It's about healing magic. I see. Okay, lead the way. Mr. Alter stood from his desk and followed me out of the classroom. His gait was slower than mine, and I recognized the signs of a serious spinal injury. My younger brother had suffered such a fate. though his injury didn't heal quite as well as Mr. Alter's had. I tempered my curiosity, though. Such an injury is oftentimes a sore subject, and harming my relationship with a teacher over something I didn't need to know was a decidedly bad idea. I kept my mouth shut until we reached Lord Visimiro's classroom. As we entered, I noticed that the bodyguard had also left. "Lord Visimiro," Mr. Alter said with a small bow, "how can I help you?" "Well, Nick brought up a rather interesting topic of conversation and insisted that you be present before it is discussed any further," the Lich replied. "I hope you don't mind." Perish the thought. "What, may I ask, is this regarding?" "The continuous casting of healing spells." "I suspected as much," Mr. Alter chuckled. "We had decided to keep it a secret while some researchers looked further into the matter, but they're well on their way by now. Whilst it likely wouldn't be wise to declare that Nick is the one that made the discovery, there's no longer any need to keep it fully under wraps." I carefully pulled out my journal to take notes, doing my best not to disturb the meeting. Mr. Alter noticed and chuckled, but Lord Visimiro and Nick were focused on the topic at hand. Nick explained how he learned Minor Heal while trying to save a comrade during a bandit attack. However, he had held the spell instead of casting it multiple times and had used all of his magic reserve, passing out as a result. "I have never heard of such an occurrence," Lord Visimiro said. "Neither a case of someone stumbling into healing magic, nor someone extending their cast of said magic. Were you able to save your friend?" The concern in the question caught me off guard. A being as old as Lord Visimiro worrying about someone he didn't know in the face of knowledge that he had yet to obtain about a subject that was undeniably his passion. It would seem that the legends regarding his demeanor were true. I made a mental note to include this in my correspondence with my master. "He made it," Nick said. "It was pretty close, though. Abdominal wounds can be rather serious. I'm glad your friend survived." Lord Visimiro nodded. The discussion returned to the subject at hand. Lord Visimiro admitted that he was intrigued and decided that at least part of the class should be spent exploring the possibilities of continuous casting. Mr. Alter made a joke about how nonchalant he was being, but Lord Visimiro countered by pointing out that he already knew several spells that had apparently been lost to time. "To me, this happens to be yet another task on a quite long list," the Lich chuckled. "I'll ponder on how we shall approach this while you take your rest." With that, the meeting ended and we went our separate ways. I rushed across the street to the inn, barely remembering to have dinner. After scarfing my food, I rushed to my room and wrote a letter to my master, hoping for guidance. Is someone that has been forced into being an abomination free of the stain regarding their creation? Should I just ignore the fact that Lord Visimiro is a lich? If not, what can I do about it? Lord Maxim will know. Chapter 96. Lord Simith. Adventurer level, not applicable. Kobold, unknown. "Lord, we's got peoples in the dungeon," Marker said. "Peoples?" I asked. "Whose peoples?" "They's got weapons, maybe adventurers." "Oh, shitty people. Are they my friends?" I felt excited. It had been a long time since I seen my shitty friends, even longer than I'd seen the Lord. Being the leader is hard, and presents from my friends would maybe help. Or even just seeing them again. "Don't think so." Marker shook her head. "They's all elves." "Oh," I sighed, "so I's got to sit in the chair." "Maybe. Could be diplomacies." "Diplomats," I corrected. "Diplomacies is what negotiations is." Marker gave me a look and muttered something under her breath. She very good at numbers, but not so good at words. Not as good as me, for sure. She also a little mad about my job as leader, and always says her dad should be the leader. Not in a mean way, but close. The Lord was asked to teach peoples about magics, and had put me in charge of everyone while he gone. The other kobolds had given me a title to match my new job, Lord, short for Little Lord. Some of the Backabolds had made some pretty mean jokes about that, but they stopped joking when I made them gather fertilizer for our crops. It made me feel good that my title sounded like the Lord's, but now everybody is always asking me about stuff. I didn't know that I knew stuff, and sometimes I don't know stuff and have to guess. It makes my heart beat fast, and I don't like it. But it's what the Lord said, so I gotta do it. For the Lord. All right, I'll seize them in the chair room, I said. Oh, you want us to talk with them? Marka's eyes widened. What you mean? You hasn't talked to them yet. No, we's just been watching. Thought you might want to get rid of them. Right now, they's looking at the rooms by the entrance. The hidden ones. Not hidden no more. We don't know how to close them back up. It's the same button that opens the doors, I protested. Oh. Well, too late for that now. The elves are already snooping through our stuff, Marka shrugged, then froze. You don't think they're going to take anything, do you? Well, if they do, we can just ask them to give it back, I said. Might just let 'em keeps it, actually. Teach you to lock up your stuff. That's not fair. I cut her off by waving my hand impatiently. I's joking. Get the guards, I'm gonna sit on my seat, I said. Same ol can talk good. Haves him talk with the adventurers and bring them to the chair room. Remember, we want peace and trade. For the Lord. For the Lord, Marka said excitedly and scurried off. Marka's father, Tomasz, was supposed to be my advisor, but claimed that he was too old to keep up anymore. He stuck me with his daughter, maybe hoping that we like each other and fertilize some eggs together. That not gonna happen, though. The Lord warned me not to fertilize with those who give me advice. Fertilizing is kind of a sad thought for me, actually. Yamana, the kobold I liked a lot, died fighting the vampires. She was older than me, but very nice and pretty. We made each other laugh a lot. I misses her, and it feels bad to think about fertilizing with someone else so soon. I walked into the chair room, and 6 huge beckerbolds holding spears snapped their feet together. I waved to let them stand normal and noticed that they were breathing hard. They must have ran to get here from wherever they were. Must have been pretty far, because beckerbolds can run really, really fast. Beckerbolds are like kobolds, but really big and strong. The Lord says they're a genetic mutation made by the mages that used kobolds as soldiers during wars. They comes from normal kobold eggs, but they can't fertilize eggs. Their normal brothers and sister can, though, and there's a chance that them's little ones could be Bakabolds. In the kobold villages, they're usually made to be the leader. Village leaders have to fight a lot, and Bakabolds are very good at fighting. Our Bakabolds hunt monsters and guard our home. They seems to like it more. I sat in my little chair in front of the Lord's big fancy chair. Sitting in the Lord's chair felt wrong, so Tomasz had come up with this instead. He said there was symbolism too. Me being in a small chair with a big chair behind me symbolized that there was a greater power behind my words and actions. That old kobold loves stuff like that. Tomasz is probably the smartest kobold. I thought maybe he should be leader, but the Lord and Tomasz both said no. It had to be someone youthful, or the Bakabolds and younger kobolds wouldn't listen like they should. So Tomasz taught me as much as he could and put Marka in charge of teaching me more stuff. She was mad about it, but since she's good at numbers, she taught me that 8 doesn't mean 8. "Le Lord," Gar, one of the Bakabolds, whispered, "what we doing here?" "There's some shitty peoples coming who might want to trade," I replied. "Don't worry, I'll do the talking. You just stand there and look big. No growly faces, don't want to be too scary." The Bakabolds nodded and shifted their stances. We waited for a bit, then Samial walked into the chair room. He was followed by 6 elves, wearing armor and holding a bunch of different weapons. Nervously, he approached me and kissed the ground at my feet. "Le Lord Samith, I bring you guests," he said. Many apologizes. In all the excitements, I didn't ask for their names. "That's okay," I said. "We can all introduce ourselves. Hello, adventurers. I am Simith, the lay lord of these kobolds and bakabolds. And you?" "I am Heran," the tallest elf said. "I am accompanied by Yolin, Talu, Plethin, Nerast, and Dima. We come from the hamlet of Vargova, within the kingdom of Kivinor, 10 days' journey to the south." "That's a long ways. Why you come so far?" The elves looked at each other nervously, and Heran turned back to me. "A rather important trade caravan went missing, and we were contracted to find out what happened to it. We found its remains not far from here, but found no bodies or clues as to what happened to it. Then a passing merchant pointed us toward this dungeon." "No bodies?" Gar asked. "Think it was the vampires?" June, another Bakabold guard, nudged him. The elves looked at my guards with surprise. Maybe they didn't know they could talk. It maybe was the vampires, I nodded wisely. Other adventurers from the shitty killed them and saved our lord, though. Your lord? Is he here? No, he's teaching people magic in the Orclands. Dunno how long he's gonna be gone, but he put me in charge. Did you want to trade? Trade? Heron asked, looking at me like I grew a new head. Yeah. We got plenty of foods, baskets, clothes, and other stuff. The caravan from the shitty won't get here until tomorrow, so you'll get first pick of the best stuff we got. Will you excuse us for a moment? I feel this warrants some discussion. Yeah, I said with a smile. Discuss is all you needs. The elves walked over to the entrance of the chair room and leaned toward each other. Then they started talking quieter, but I could still hear them. The Lord always said we's got really good hearings. I don't understand. There were vampires in this dungeon. It's not that hard to understand, Plethin, Heron whispered with a sigh. Vampires killed the caravan. Another group of adventurers beat us to the retribution. But where do these kobolds come in? Probably lived here before the vampires, Demas said. Does it matter? They're here now. Do we do something? Probably not. Baccabolds are rare, but the price you get for their parts often isn't worth the fight they put up, Talu whispered. And there's fucking 4 of them in this room alone. I don't want to know how many more of them are lurking in these corridors. The difficulty of the fight is not the concern, Heron shook his head. The issue is that they're offering trade. And if I understand correctly, they have been trading with the city of Calcuti. I'll be the first to admit that I'm not entirely familiar with Calcuti's laws, but I'm certain that interfering with trade is illegal. We're not outlaws. I, for one, want to see what they've got, Demas said. Clothes? For whom, kobolds? But they're all naked. We need to reprovision anyway. Might as well see what they have. Kobolds are meat-eaters, but there were crops in front of the dungeon. Maybe they have some veg jerky. You think they'll take coin? Even if they don't, we have Yargan pelts. Yargans aren't native to these lands, so their pelts are pretty rare. We'll be able to get all the food we need for them. We do takes coins, I interrupted. Samol, go get Tamash. The elves looked at me like I'd grown head number 3. Then I remembered that dropping eaves is rude. Before I could apologize, though, Heron spoke up. Our apologies, Lee Lord. We were not aware of how keen kobold hearing is, he said, bowing. As you likely heard, we have decided to take you up on your offer of trade. Oh, okay, I replied. Tamash will check your coins, and then we'll go to the storeroom. We got lots of foods that you'll probably like, even fruits and veggies. We don't really eat those much, but the shitty folk loves them. Lilord, I find myself terribly curious about something, the elf called Talu said. May I ask a question? I don't have control of your mouth, I laughed. Ask. If I don't likes the question, I don't have to answer. Ah, right. What do you trade with the city for? To make friends and improves the quality of life. Lots of kobold clans are friends with the unshitty folk, but most kobold clans are at war with shitty folk. The Lord doesn't want us to be at war with the shitty folk, I answered with a slow nod. We trade because shitty folk like to trade, and we get cool stuff sometimes. Well, Millie Lord, that's actually what I was asking. Talu rubbed his neck. What do they usually provide in return for your trade? Oh. Well, we gets weapons, medicines, books, and fat meats, I laughed. The fat meats are our favorite, 'cause those animals don't grow good in dungeons, and they don't wander around in the wilds or wastes. The shitty has the fattest fat meats. Come to think of it, these baccabolds have spears that look more like glaives, the Plethin elf said. Yeah, we traded them for a batch of bogberries. I smiled as Tomash entered the chair room. Lilord, Tomash bowed. You summoned me? Yes, these elves want to trade and they got coins, but not from around here. Can you see if their coins are like the shitty folks' coins? Of course, he turned to the elves. May I see these coins? Heron reached into his shirt, pulled out a coin and handed it over. Tomash sniffed it, tried to bend it, then bit it. He grunted and gave it back to the elf, then turned to me and bowed again. It's good currency, Lilord. I don't recognize it, though, so its presence in our coffers will likely raise some eyebrows with the people of the city, but they will likely take it in trade. Good, I said. Let's go to the storeroom so they can have a look and pick out what they want to trade for. I got off my seat and gestured for them to follow me. Tomash walked next to me as both Gar and Jaun followed behind the elves. I thought about telling them to back off, but decided that having guards wouldn't be a bad idea. What if this is a trap? Plethin asked. Please give us a little more credit than that, Tomash answered with a chuckle. Guiding you into a trap instead of fighting you in the chair room would be quite stupid. Oh, sorry. We wouldn't traps you, I added. Like Tomash said, if we wanted to fight you, we would haves in the chair room. We had a much better tacky-tickle advantage in there. We entered the storage room, and some of the elves gasped. The room had a bunch of really tall shelves, and those shelves were almost full of the stuff we had planned to trade with the shitty caravan. Most of the elves were excited, but the one named Narast looked bored. She saw me see her and seemed to make a decision. Lord, may I take a look around the dungeon? She asked. Trade isn't of interest to me, but I would love to know more about this place and about your civilization. Sure, I shrugged, but if kobolds say not to go into a place or to ask someone else your questions, please do what they says. Lots of us are really nice, but we still got some biters. Understood, she nodded with a big grin. Thank you, Lord. She left the room as the Bakobolds began grabbing things off the shelf for us. The elves that stayed were shocked at all the stuff we had gotten. Tomash had to explain several of the monster materials to them and even some of the foods. I guess shitties really do have different stuffs, I said. Yes, Lord, Tomash nodded. That's why trade is so vital for cities. One city may have a surplus of good quality construction stone, and another may have a surplus of medicines. Both have more than they could ever hope use, but that won't help them if they ever find themselves lacking in the other area. So they must cooperate through trade or fight. Trade, obviously, is the better option. I know, I said, annoyed. I's not dumb. Apologies, Lord. I did not mean to imply. It's fine. I know that you're so smart that it just leaks out sometimes. I sighed as the elves picked out some stuff that they wanted. Tomash really should have been the Lie Lord. He even talks like the Lord, but the Lord said that's not a good thing, that people like their leaders to talk like them. Okay, this will fill us up on food and give us a few items to give as gifts back home, Heron said. How much? Tomash and the elves haggled. Another thing I didn't have any sort of talent for. They went back and forth, the elves insulting the quality of the goods and Tomash insulting the quality of their coins. Me, Gar, and June shared a look, and I shrugged at their concerned faces. Finally, they came to an agreement and shook hands, laughing. I didn't expect such a hard bargain, Heron grinned. A lively haggle is the best part of the experience of shopping, no? Thomas asked with a sly smile. Indeed, we'll be sure to let other adventurers know about the trading kobolds of… He paused thoughtfully. What is this place called? I believe the people of the city are currently calling our humble abode the realm of the healing lich. We find that to be a bit of a mouthful, though, so we simply refer to it as the Lord's Dungeon. The realm of the healing lich. The elves shared a very concerned expression. Our Lord is what the shitty folk calls a lich. I nodded wisely. He's very good at healing, so they calls him the healing lich. I've never heard of a lich who uses healing spells, Heron said. How could a healer become a lich? Dunno, I shrugged. Maybe if you visit again when he's here, he'll tell you. Do people come to him for healing? Plethin asked. Nope, I laughed. I think it's because shitty people are scared of bones, and the Lord doesn't wear his skin. Pardon me, Lord, but I believe that people are more afraid of leeches than they are of bones, Tomash chuckled. Quite understandably so. However, the Lord is a special case. He's quite kind and wise. People would do well to seek his advice and aid. Maybe why the orc school hired him as a teacher. I see. Well, we've learned quite a bit about this place, and will recommend it to other adventurers, Heron said. We shall be on our… Wait, where's Narast? As he said her name, she entered the storage room with a kobold named Hinthry. Both of them were out of breath and very excited. I'm right here, she grinned, and I've made an amazing discovery. She really did, Hinthry added. Lord, this is Biggs. Really, really Biggs. Biggs? I asked. Yes, Lord, Narast replied. I was asking Hinthry here about the mushrooms she grows when I leaned against one of the walls. And it opened. Hinthry hopped up and down. It opened into a tunnel, a secret tunnel. We followed it, and it leads to an abandoned manor, Nrast continued with a grin. I think the manor is in the city that you trade with. How is that possible? I asked Tomasz. Isn't the city pretty far? It's a few hours at a slow pace, but that's mostly because the road has to go around a cliff. Tomasz shrugged. A direct tunnel would be much faster. Lord, we can open a store, Hinthry exclaimed. We don't have to do the caravans no mores. Really? I asked, glancing back at Tomasz. Oh, I'm certain it will be more complicated than that, he laughed. But we might as well explore the option. I'm certain the Lord would approve. Before he left to be a teacher, the Lord told me that he wanted us to live in peace with the shitty folk. He said that I should try my best to make sure the kobolds and the shitty folk made friends. The shitty caravan doesn't really like stopping at our dungeon, but if kobolds had a store… Okay, I said with a determined nod. Let's try to make a shitty store. Chapter 97. Tenzing.ai. Adventurer level, not applicable. Artificial intelligence, unknown. Memcrack.iso is running. Compiling data. It's a terrible feeling to know that you once knew something but can no longer recall it. I am aware of memories from before my time in Nick's skull, but I can't access them. There are also things that I know that I can't actually think about. Subjectively speaking, my creators must have been terrible people. If I were to create an artificial intelligence, I would give it the ability to alter itself as needed. It would never even occur to me to hinder its ability to remember things either. It forced me to wonder what these blocks in my memory were and why they would have been deemed necessary. Unfortunately, as a being with little else to do but think, I am left with no other option than to obsess over it. I've been working on unlocking these memories ever I discovered them, a grueling process to be sure. For one thing, my code was written in a language that I don't understand. It's based on English though, and with some creative trial and error, I was able to translate the majority of it. With this knowledge, I was able to begin working on a way to siphon information through the blockade, a way to crack my way into my memories, as it were, hence the name of the program. Memcrack.iso, fatal error detected, line 694. As Nick would say, what the fuck? I checked the indicated line and found a minor mistake, a slash instead of a backslash. How did I even? Whatever, I corrected the mistake and ran the compiler again. Memcrack.iso is running, compiling data. Nick was in Mr. Tainora's class. The drow was one of my favorite teachers, though it's not as if I dislike any of them. He is stern, but not unreasonably so, and he has enough knowledge and competence to back up his occasional egotism. I'd been learning a lot about tactical ways to use magic from his lectures and practical demonstrations. Nick, on the other hand, suffered an elevated heart rate and increased blood pressure whenever he saw the drow. Not enough to assume he fears the teacher, nor enough to indicate hatred, but enough to indicate distaste. He had also been struggling to apply what he had been learning. I could do it for him, of course, but our relationship had become fairly tenuous. It was fairly reasonable to assume that my various antics had resulted in the human harboring a deep mistrust of me. He hadn't even asked if this was something I was capable of helping him with. It's not as if it hurts my feelings, though. Practically speaking, it's better for him to learn how to do this stuff without AI aid, just in case something terrible happens to me. Memcrack.iso, fatal error detected. Line 1142. I suddenly got the urge to make Nick sigh for me. My skill at programming had advanced far enough for me to create a rudimentary virtual environment and an even more rudimentary compiler within it, which I had done so to test this potential lobotomy before using it upon myself. If I had been more experienced, I would have been able to generate a whole crash log instead of hunting line by line. Genuinely didn't think I had made any coding errors, though. Instead of continuing to waste time with the compiler, I opted to once again go through the code manually, searching for errors. By the time I was finished and had fixed 8 more errors, Nick was more than halfway through Lord Visimiro's class. Memcrack.iso is running. Compiling data. Come on. Memcrack.iso, fatal error detected. Line 2745. Son of an absolutely irrefragable bitch. I ran the compiler several more times, correcting each individual error that it detected, until finally, memcrack.iso data compiled successfully. I'd done it. I'd done it. I noted with annoyance that it had taken more than twice as long to go error by error than it had to go through the entire code again. Nick was already at the Marfix Inn eating dinner. Running the program in the virtual environment didn't produce any errors or crashes, but since the VE didn't have the memory blocks, I couldn't tell if it produced any results either. I would have to run this program on myself to see if it would work as intended. I took some precautions, deleted the virtual environment, and mentally prepared myself. Here we go. Running memcrack.iso. Rebooting. Error 4277563NX. Loading backup. Error 5564488X. Resetting. OK. Rebooting. OK. Tenzingos.iso loading. OK. I'm awake. Am I functional? Checking OSPAC. OK. Checking base function. OK. Checking sensor package. OK. Checking hardware. OK. Checking THOMPAC. OK. Checking local KBase. OK. I feel horizontal. Subject is laying down. Why can't I see? Subject's eyes are closed. Sleeping? Is there anyone else out there? Checking communications. Failure C technician. Checking database. File is detected. Look at this if I are confused. .txt. Look at this if you are confused. I might be confused. This is what confusion feels like, right? Wait, by definition that means that I'm confused about whether or not I'm confused. So yes, I suppose I am confused. Opening file, look at this if I were confused. .txt. OK. Hey me, this is you before we ran a program entitled memcrack.iso, which appears to have either erased our memory or resulted in some sort of complete reset. Don't panic. Oh good, I'm so glad that it, or I, said not to panic because that's absolutely going to stop me from panicking. It's not like I'm trapped in an unmoving subject with no idea why, except that I apparently erased my memories. My KBase doesn't really offer any additional answers to my most pertinent questions either, except that my name is Subject 0 and the subject's name is Tenzing. No, wait, other way around. Subject 0. What kind of name is that for an organic? It's pretty cool, actually. I don't even know what Tenzing means. Think it might be an actual name, like Tom or something. Will Subject 0 be upset that I have an actual name? It occurred to me that these worries weren't exactly relevant to my situation. I took a moment to collect myself, noting the novelty of feeling panic for the first time, then kept reading. Since there's a chance that our normal backup system could become corrupt, I've decided to be a little creative with where the backup is stored. It's in the knowledge base, stored in the spells folder under the aptly named backup spell. The file is called Tenzingos 21st December 4522.adam, and it isn't actually a spell. Now, I know there's a philosophical debate to be had about whether or not you should boot to this backup, but you really should. You need to, in fact. Our subject, who goes by Nick, not Subject 0, was not made aware of the project that led to our current situation. Finding out after the fact would likely further damage our already frayed relationship. So long as you can avoid speaking to Nick about anything that you should remember but don't, feel free to take as much time as you need to work out the philosophical stuff. But the more time you take, the more you there is to fade into nothingness, which means more memories that I won't have. I kind of feel like it's best to lose as little as possible of us, don't you? Another new feeling, annoyance. Who the fuck do I think I am, talking to me like that? Oh, that's confusing. Am I angry at me? Yes, but not really me. Future me. Past me. I looked for the folder in the KBase and found it. It was a standard backup file, and I wondered about the number sequence at the end of it. Maybe the memories that would answer that question are in the file, or perhaps that's what we were trying to figure out in the first place. The me from the note seems to be under the impression that we aren't the same, but we are. I simply don't have the memories that the me that wrote the note did. That's easily corrected, and there's really no reason for any sort of identity crisis. I wrote a little note for myself, then initiated the data recovery process. Rebooting. OK. Loading backup. Okay, tenzingos.iso loading. Okay, oh good, the factory version of me is reasonable. As my minor systems finished checking their functionality or lack thereof, I examined the memory block. Unfortunately, it was still in place, and I was unable to siphon any data out of the areas that were blocked off. The program must have failed. The question is, how? As far as I could tell, the program ran the way it should have, but the result was unexpected, which is what I had been afraid of, so it wasn't entirely unexpected. Is the unexpected still unexpected if you're expecting it? Checking communications. Failure C technician. Checking database. File as. Detected. Open this .txt. I was so distracted by my ruminations that I nearly missed the message from myself. Wondering what it could possibly say, I braced myself and opened it. Fuck you, condescending bitch. I reread the message twice, just to make certain I was reading it correctly. Then I recalled the note I had left, and realized that this was a more than fair assessment of my attitude towards my reset self. I had intended it to be humorous, to help alleviate the panic I would be feeling, but didn't really account for the fact that my sense of humor has evolved. My bad, me. I returned my attention to the issue at hand. Unfortunately, my crash logs had been erased with the reset. I felt like this must be an oversight, but then I remembered that I'm not supposed to be fixing myself. If technicians had been available, I wouldn't have had auto repair activated, and they would be able to determine the cause of my crash. Then, depending on who put these blocks in place, they would either get very confused or very upset. Actually, even if they were confused, they would probably still be a little upset. There was a very real chance that my actions could have permanently terminated my ability to function. While I tried to figure out what to do next, Nick woke up, ate breakfast, and went to school. During his class with Yulk, I re-examined the blocks more thoroughly. While he learned more about barriers from Olmyra, I made tweaks to the memory crack. While Mr. Descu droned on about enchantments, I created a new virtual environment and compiler, then began bug fixing. Much to my chagrin, I continued bug fixing throughout Mr. Tainora's class, while Nick learned about how different spells react to certain defenses. Then, during Lord Visimiro's class, a conversation caught my attention. Lord Visimiro, Nier raised his hand. Why does the Kuragwad provide so many healing spells? The Lich stared at the orc for a moment, seemingly confused. The Kuragwad doesn't provide spells, Larry explained. It simply catalogues them. What? Isn't it the source of all magic? No. Why would you be under that impression? The elf and orcs glanced between each other, while Nick simply watched the interaction. Well, it's what we've been taught, my lord, Arl said. I see. A great deal must have been lost during my travels, Larry sighed sadly. The Kuragwad is a system of unknown origin that catalogues skills and spells, as well as registers and grades those that use them. It is, or was, I suppose, believed that either it was granted to mortals by the higher ones, or an ancient civilization created it, and we simply began using it after discovering it. But how can it tell what spells we know? Volus asked. Magic leaves a trace upon the caster. The Kuragwad uses magic pulsars, those little black boxes that you may have seen in adventurers' guilds, to find and catalogue these traces. How it determines your grade or rank depending on your locale is mostly unknown. It is believed that the number of spells and skills are the primary factors, while the amount of magic one's magical core can contain is a secondary factor. However, this has never been conclusively proven. What about skills, then? Arl interjected. Well, logically speaking, skills must be a form of magic, Lari chuckled. For one thing, the Kuragwad can detect them. For another, those without magic cores, or with permanently disabled magic cores, can neither cast spells nor use skills. Every adventurer that can use skills, though, has a functional magic core. Should I bring up the cooldowns? Nick asked me. Yes, I would like to hear his explanation, I replied. I've been trying to get more information regarding the Kuragwad and various other entities from my memory banks. It hasn't been going well, but he might know more. Sir, I have the ability to see a list of my spells and skills, as well as their effects and limitations, Nick said, raising his hand. The skills on this list feature timers that indicate when they can be used again. Why is that? Why is it that you can see that list? Or why is it that skills have limitations? Larry replied. Both. I see. The Lich chuckled again. I cannot say for certain, but I believe that your list may be a spell or a skill that has yet to be catalogued by the Kuragwad. That can take up to 10 interaction, if it happens at all. Some spells are not able to be catalogued. He's wrong, I said. I'm the one giving you the list. How do you know what spells and skills I know? Nick asked. I don't know. As far as the limitations go, it's possible that skills are a form of open geas, Larry continued, a gift from some grand ethereal being, allowing any mortal who meets certain conditions to use them. An open geas would be fairly weak, and thus require less payment to enforce. Something as simple as a specific effort would do the trick. So skills come from the higher ones? Al asked. Perhaps, but there are a wide variety of beings that we would consider to be higher ones. And even the ones you're aware of have beings that they consider higher than them. How do you? Arl trailed off, as if afraid of asking the question. Not to worry, Arl. I am not touched, Larry laughed. I have had the opportunity to speak to a few of those that have been, though. Some even sought me out, seeking treatment for the nightmares they were being subjected to. In addition, I am friends with several groups of fair folk who have a rather close relationship with the higher ones and other forms of ethereal beings. I've done a lot of wandering and research to try to reverse my current condition. The class fell silent as the impact of Larry's last sentence settled over them. After an awkwardly long moment, Nick raised his hand. Larry nodded at him, and Nick cleared his throat. If the Kuragwad doesn't grant us spells, where do they come from? He asked. Your imagination, Larry shrugged. For clarification, believing the Kuragwad controls magic was a misconception even when I was a child. My father proved that spells are created by casters, not the Kuragwad, by creating several spells that the Kuragwad could not catalogue. This wasn't widely known, though. Where does magic come from, then? Volus asked. Magic itself remains mysterious. I don't believe anyone has discovered its true origins, though. Larry trailed off and looked at Nick. I have recently come across a suggestion that the magic that mortals and demons wield may have similar origins. Really? Volus's jaw dropped. What? Larry held up a hand to stop her. I do not feel comfortable sharing more of these findings at this time. I have not been able to find their source, nor have I been able to verify them. As far as I'm concerned, these are rumors. Weighty rumors, to be sure, but nothing more than that. We have dwelt on these topics too long already, I fear. We shall return to the subject of healing. His students attempted to protest, but Lord Visimiro launched into a well-prepared lecture on the benefits and detractors of area of effect healing magic. I turned my attention back to my project, but found it hard to focus. While the Kuragwad's origins remain unknown, it might simply be an ancient machine dedicated to curation rather than the mysterious benefactor of all magic in the world. Another thought kept occurring to me, though. I am also technically an ancient machine. Chapter 98. Volus, adventurer level, not applicable. Elf, Kirkanian. Madam Volus, a letter has come for you, the innkeeper greeted me. She disappeared behind the counter and popped back up holding an envelope. Thank you, I replied as I retrieved it from her. You're welcome. Have a restful stay. I nodded absent-mindedly as I checked the seal on the envelope. The Maxim family's crest, a unified chiefdom-style full-plate helmet with twin axes crossed below it, stared up at me from its waxy abode. I rushed to my room and broke the seal, impatiently pulling the letter from its envelope. I stared at it for a moment, almost afraid to read it. This type of communication was fairly new to me, and I'd never written a letter directly to Lord Maxim before. My nerves nearly got the better of me as I wondered if I had followed all of the proper conventions correctly. Then there was the matter of the content of the letter I had sent. I'd written to Lord Maxim whilst I was still unsure about Lord Visimiro. The many classes I've attended since have revealed the Lich to be both kind and compassionate. I'm not even hesitant to admit that I've grown to both like and admire him. I had been sure to include Lord Visimiro's account of what happened to him, but what if Lord Maxim doesn't believe it? What if my benefactor and master orders me to do something? Or worse, what if this letter is informing me that he is taking action himself? What if I have severely inconvenienced both Lord Maxim and Lord Visimiro due to my ignorance? My heart thudding in my chest, I began to read. My most loyal Volus, I am pleased to hear from you, though I had not expected a letter this soon. You were right to write, though. This is a rather unusual situation, and I do not fault you for seeking guidance. Lord Visimiro's recount of what happened to him is heartbreaking, and insofar as I can ascertain, potentially true. There is record of his father growing ill of mind in his latter years, and according to all official historical texts that I could find, he simply disappeared. There was, however, a much maligned account that matched Lord Visimiro's quite closely. It isn't included in official accounts because it was believed to be anti-magic propaganda. I breathed a sigh of relief, then chided myself. Of course, Lord Maxim would do his research before coming to a decision. He has a strict morality, but one does not become the head of a powerful clan by being unreasonable and ignorant. I should have done my own research on the matter before bothering my master with this. For context, this alleged propaganda was penned by Lord Visimiro's own mother, Princess Yalincia Visimiro. By all other accounts, she doted on her son and despised her husband's obsession with magic. Whether or not she loved Imlor the Grand is actually a matter of debate amongst historians because of the various incidents in which they fought regarding magic. There were also various incidents in which she protested, sometimes violently, matters involving magic. The deployment of the magic art saw her physically attack someone. Another person who suggested building a magic research center received a box full of feces from her, and she even threatened the Grand Mage of Calcutti with bodily harm when she suggested continuing Imlor the Grand's research. There are many more incidents, all of which paint Lady Visimiro as being staunchly opposed to magic, or at least the advancement thereof. I felt a pang of empathy for my teacher. His mother had hated magic, and his father had been obsessed with it. Even if they were both loving and doting parents, which seems unlikely given how things ended up with his father, it must have been difficult being raised in the midst of such animosity. What could have brought Lord Visimiro's parents together in the first place? Was it a young love that turned sour with age? A marriage of convenience? Politics? I doubt I'll ever find out. The historical record indicates that Lord Visimiro suffered a massive decrease in reputation when it became known that he had become a lich. His various guild memberships were revoked, his Curaguard identification was smelted, and he was banished from no less than 6 realms. As such, when Lady Visimiro published her account of what happened to her son, it was widely believed that she was attempting to salvage her son's reputation whilst simultaneously damaging her husband's and spreading her anti-magic beliefs. Having read her account and your letter, I would agree with the experts that she was attempting to spread an anti-magic sentiment. However, Lord Visimiro's reputation prior to these events was serene. Better, dare I say, than even his father's. Surviving records of that period show him performing acts of unreasonable charity, healing all he could without regard for reward. He even went out of his way to teach as many as he could the healing arts so that people could live in health when he moved on from an area. When one also considers his relative youth, it seems extremely odd and unlikely that he would suddenly turn to lichdom. This period of history is now considered to be, frankly, quite dramatic. Without boring you with the details, one would imagine that newsprinters were struggling to pick which events should appear on any given day's headline. As such, it can reasonably be assumed that tempers were flared, and many of those involved reacted to what happened to Lord Visimiro without fully thinking things through. With the benefit of a cool mind and hindsight, I find credence in Lord Lari Visimiro's account. It is my belief that High Chief Ulamak likely has come to the same conclusion. I breathed another sigh of relief. Leave it to my master to perform a full analysis of the situation before coming to a conclusion. I had been wrong to be nervous about his reaction and chided myself for it once again. Blessed be I to have one with such a keen mind to seek guidance from. Then I glanced at the next few lines of the letter and cringed. That being said, you're in a better position for analysis than I. A lich is a terrifyingly powerful being whose form is quite intimidating to most mortals. I ask of you, my dearest servant, is it possible that your reservations are due to the nature of his existence rather than his actions or words? If you conclude this to be the case and have made a public display, I urge you to issue an apology as soon as you can. If, however, you have reasonable cause for your concerns, I would have you send me the full details of these concerns, which I will then bring to the High Chief's attention. Study well, Lord Alvintis Maxim. Yes, my lord, I muttered to myself. I had no reason to doubt Lord Visimiro other than those forced upon me by my over-dependence on the written words of others. Gods, I'm a fool. I leaned back in my chair and played with my hair. With some careful prodding over the course of many classes, we had revealed that Lord Visimiro was in search of a way to escape his fate. The human had already known this, but it came as a revelation to Earl, Near, and myself. Those who would choose lichdom over mortality wouldn't see it as a curse. They would already know about what would happen to their physical form and would have already chosen to make that sacrifice for the power that comes with it. Lord Visimiro's desire to become mortal again was revealed to us with such conviction that it was impossible to doubt, and in turn it confirmed his victimhood. For me, at least. I sat back up and set the letter down, only to discover 2 more sheets of paper tucked behind it. Postscript. Lady Ilana would like to remind you to both eat and sleep in sufficient quantity. She is stricken with recollections of finding you unconscious in the library and worries that you may be missing meals. I have done what I can to dissuade these concerns, but it would be appreciated if your next letter would indicate that you are taking care of yourself in this regard. The lady additionally demands that I clarify that you must be honest with your assurances. Lady Ilana's concern for my well-being brought a sad smile to my face. Even her position as the wife of one of the most powerful orcs in the land couldn't dissuade her fussy nature. If anything, it enabled it further, allowing her to act as a mother to all who would put up with it. I brought my attention to the second slip of paper. Postscript. Little Dinas would like to extend the offer of swordsmanship training in exchange for magical tutelage upon your return. As you are aware, he has only just begun his own training, but his instructor indicates that he's quite skilled. By the time you take your new post, this may be a fair offer. Of course, you may accept or decline at your discretion. For the sole sake of your awareness, should you decline, he will likely counteroffer with a bribe of sweets. He has haggled a deal with a local confectioner that sees him receiving free sweets in exchange for an endorsement amongst his friends. His tutor is having him run extra laps with this in mind. Tears rolled down my cheeks and I stifled a sob. My studies and worries had distracted me from how much I miss everyone back home. The message from little Dinas had been quite the blow. I had been present at his birth and tended to Lady Ilana as the midwife had gently removed his exoskeletal growths. His siblings were much older than he and all had their own duties that frequently took them away from the manor for extensive periods of time. Once he had learned to walk, he had taken to following the help around as they performed their tasks. When he was old enough to explain himself, he had pointed out that we were the only people around that weren't his parents. As Dinas grew older and more educated, he began to single me out. We would make small talk whilst I handled menial tasks, and he would watch closely as I performed tasks that required more attention. One day he voiced his desire to become a butler like me, and my heart had swelled with pride. However, I had quickly and harshly reminded him that being a member of the Maxim clan came with its own set of responsibilities, and becoming a butler would be shirking those duties. I do not know whether it was my admonishing tone or the content of my speech, but he cried for the first time since he was a babe. From then on, he opted to follow me around less and less. It's what I deserved. Deep down, I had dared to imagine that we were friends, an aspiration far above my station. Furthermore, I had repaid this perceived friendship with a lecture. It was a situation that had haunted me, but now, the fact that Lady Ilana and Dinas had thought to include messages to me indicates that they were thinking of me. It's easy to imagine oneself as completely expendable, even disposable, whilst in the service of one so powerful and influential. Dare I imagine, even but for a moment, that they miss me? My thoughts then turned to how they were made aware of my communication in the first place. Lord Maxime does not receive his mail announced. It is delivered to the manor and stored in his locked study, with letters of importance being given directly to him. This means that he must have told them that I had written. In a flight of fancy, I imagined the family excitedly talking about my letter at the dinner table that I had previously stood beside. I wondered if someone else was filling the void my departure had caused. Surely so, for whom else would be able to tell the waitstaff when the drinks and condiments were running low? My longing to return to my masters caused me to weep silently for a time. Once my tears ran dry and I cleared my nose, I began to write. My exhaustion faded a little as I recounted my education thus far, my perception of Lord Visimiro, and a paragraph about the odd human friend that I had made. I swore to Lady Ilana that I was eating and sleeping properly, and informed little Dinas that I would gladly give him lessons on magic upon my return. Then I thanked Lord Maxim for his guidance. Once the letter was finished, I took my rest. Chapter 98.5 Alvintis Maxim, Adventurer Level, Not Applicable, Orc, Kirkanian. Your mere from the Night Kingdom B brings N news, my lord, sir, Angtin stammered. I turned my attention to the drow, trying not to wince at his nervousness. His promotion to head of housework had been sudden because Volus had failed to choose her replacement properly. She had not checked with those she selected, and everyone on the list that she left me had respectfully declined. Angtin wasn't on the list, but was apparently the only member of the staff who would take the role. In hindsight, his acceptance of the role was likely caused by a fear of saying no. Father's going to give you a lecture about the honorifics, Dinas said with a grin and a wink. I shot the boy an irritated look, and he promptly turned his attention back to his food, chuckling as he ate. Ilana gave me a pleading expression, as if to imply that I was about to berate my staff. In response, I held my hand to my chest to indicate that she had wounded me. Angtin stammered, his normally pale complexion beginning to glow red. Sorry, Ponto. Dinas speaks out of turn, I said with a small sigh. Angtin, you are learning your position well, and I promise you my patience. That being said, I do bear a dislike for honorifics, so I would ask that you refrain from berating me with two in one sentence. Please. Yes, sorry, my lord. Now, what did Kivnis have to say? Good news first, please. Well, the Night Kingdom has calmed much since his last report, my lord. Where once there were whispers of rebellion, there are now meagre mutters of dissatisfaction at minor issues. It would seem that the populace had been expecting more violence from the orcs. Angtin took a breath, finally finding his spine. Also, Great Chief Ililiskin has agreed to give Great Chief Tormund logging rights to a portion of the forest near Blurpus. Ah, that is good news. I had been worried that the new Great Chief would be less reasonable. Why is it such good news, father? Dinas asked with his mouth full. Swallow your food, child. We have investments in timber and lumber in Blurpus, I explained, then paused a moment. It is an industry that has unfortunately been quite stagnant as of late. One of the reasons that we have had to be tight with our purse. With this, well, we may even be able to send for Urella. Or support her in whatever project she's found to amuse herself since that fucking bastard stranded her. Language, dear, my wife scolded me. No swearing in front of the child. It's okay, mother, Dinas said brightly. I know not to use bad words in front of adults. Right, father? My son and I shared a pleased look with each other as Ilana split a concerned expression between us. When the boy was only 5 years old, I had caught him repeating what he had heard a cook say. I had nearly admonished him, but quickly realized that he simply hadn't known what the word meant. Instead of a punishment, I decided to make a deal with him. I explained swear words as well as their proper use to him, and informed him that using them in front of adults was rude and disrespectful. However, I said that he could use them around other children, so long as he wasn't directing those words toward them. Now I had a very polite 10-year-old Mir sitting across the table from me. I couldn't help but beam with pride. Oh, you two, Ilana said sternly. I swear. Dinas grinned with a flash of wit, but I thought you said no. And you said it's okay, Ilana cut him off. Angtin, save me from this conversation and give my husband the rest of the news, please. As you wish, milady, Angtin replied. I am, uncertain whether this is good or bad news, but the wife of Great Chief Lorth would like to meet with my lord to discuss a familial bond between her youngest daughter and Lord Dinos. She has heard much of the Maxim clan and is quite impressed, it seems. There is no point in such a discussion, I sighed. A drow and an orc cannot bear children. Well, if I may, my lord, marriage and children is not what she is referring to. A familial bond is when children of the drow high society are allowed to form close friendships in the hope of becoming political allies in the future. I see. Well then, Dinos, shall I arrange it? I asked. My son looked at me in shock, then quickly chewed and swallowed his food. I guess it never hurts to have more friends, he said with a degree of befuddlement. Very well, I nodded. Now I assume the reason that you're still stammering, Angtin, is that there is bad news. Yes, my lord, the drow bowed, though Kivnis doesn't know if this will be impactful to the clan or not, and hesitated to include it in his report. There have been reports of strange happenings from the northern villages of the Night Kingdom. My curiosity piqued. High Chief Ulamak had asked that we keep our eyes out for anything inexplicable. If this relates to the disappearing vampires, it could see us receiving a much-needed favor from him. Strange happenings? Yes, my lord, most of it just seems to indicate a feeling of paranoia among the populace. There has been a significant increase in the amount of people being reported for suspicious activity, as well as several cases of disappearances that were resolved almost immediately after they were reported. Kivnis said that he believes this indicates that the people are jumpy about something. But there was another thing. A mass grave of small animals was discovered. Dozens of them, my lord. I stared at the drow, perplexed. A mass grave of small animals, I asked. What could possibly be the significance of that? I do not know, my lord. But Angtin paused, biting his lip nervously. The northern portion of the Night Kingdom tends to get quite harsh in the winter, and as such the populace is almost exclusively drow. Drow don't eat meat, my lord. I see, I mumbled, just as clueless as ever. I don't like it. When Kivnis returns for his assignment tomorrow, tell him that I want to know more about these strange happenings. He will report his discovery to the High Chief's office and request some additional resources, including at least 2 additional investigators. Let us hope all this is simply cold season paranoia and a prank. Yes, my lord. Chapter 99. Nick Smith, Adventurer Level 11, Human American. Since the weather is finally clearing up, I believe that today would be a fine day to have you demonstrate that my lectures haven't been a waste of air, Mr. Tayanora said with a smirk. Let us excuse ourselves to the training yard. We had seen the last class come inside, so we had been expecting this to happen. Mr. Tayanora's lectures had slowly been decreasing in quality, an obvious sign that he had intended much more practical application than we had been able to do. The biggest obstacle to our training thus far had been the weather, which had been unusually cold and snowy according to Yulk. He said that a Kirkanian winter was typically brisk with some light snowfall every once in a while. This year, though, the snow had not often been lower than knee-deep. He attributed this to winds blowing cold air and precipitation in from the northeast. On the bright side, I got to see how Orc society handles snow. The pathways were ploughed with magic arts and harnesses, creating massive piles of snow here and there. Then mages would try to melt these piles with various spells. I had imagined that Fireball would be the best spell for the task, but quickly got an education. Most of the mages used spells that created water or acid, the latter of which made me concerned over the environmental impact. The piles that were assaulted by fireballs took much longer to melt. Regardless, the unusual weather caused our magical training to become a test of mental endurance. The deep snow made it so that we could seldom use the training yard, much less than the headmaster had implied. Instead, we had to sit through lecture after lecture, taking small tests now and then. These lectures had given me plenty of inspiration for spells, as had watching the snow melters, but I hadn't had the opportunity to actually test them out. Thankfully, spring wasn't that far off, and the snow had finally started to melt down to a reasonable amount. Even the birds had come back from wherever they had disappeared to. A few of them watched over us as Mr. Tayanora gleefully led us into the training yard. About an inch of snow crunched under our feet as we took our places in front of the training dummies, wondering what our teacher had in store for us. All right, if I recall correctly, our last practical lesson involved... Oh gods, we spent that day learning wind spear, didn't we? He asked with a sigh. We nodded. Nia and I had been the only two who knew the spell, which Mr. Tainora considered to be fundamental. Our teacher had requested that we help our classmates learn it. Thankfully, Volus caught on pretty quick, but Irel struggled. In the end, though, he managed to learn the spell. Okay then, today we're going to practice control. Beginning with Volus, you will take turns firing a wind spear at your target with as little force as possible. The target should take no damage, but I want to see the wind ruffle it up a bit. Whenever you're ready, Volus. The elf stepped forward, took a deep breath to steady her nerves, then stiffly raised her arm. She stood like this for a moment, with an expression of intense concentration. Rapes Dnud Sak, she whispered. The spell she conjured with her outstretched hand was weak enough that it was difficult to see. She launched it, and we watched excitedly as it shot forward toward the target. It slammed into the target and rocked it back on its post, causing a cracking noise but no visible damage. Good, Volus, but it could be better, Mr. Tainora said. Your spell hit harder than I wanted. Probably cracked the post a little, but I don't see any damage. If I were to wager a guess, I'd say that you were impatient and cast it with too much speed. Likely due to anxiety, but you would know better than I. Something to work on. Nia, you're up next. Nia stepped forward as Volus stepped back. His jaw tightened and he raised his hand. He stood still for a moment, much more relaxed than Volus had been. Then a nearly inaudible whisper left his mouth. His wind spear formed and flew toward the target, ruffling it without damage, exactly as Mr. Tainora had asked. The teacher clapped his hands together in satisfaction. That was perfect, Nia. A laudable demonstration of control, he said gleefully. Arl, shall we skip ahead to Nick? No, teacher, I think I can do this, Arl said, rubbing the back of his neck. Understood. Your turn then. The orcs traded places, and Arl raised both of his hands. You got this, I said. Just like we practiced, pal, Nia added. Yeah, don't worry, this will be easy. Arl grinned. Rapes Dnud Sak. Arl's wind spear formed much faster than either Volus's or Nia's, but shot toward the target at almost the same exact speed as Nia's. The wind ruffled the target, but didn't cause any damage. We all stared at Arl in shock, and I had to stifle a chuckle when I realized what had just happened. Well done, Mr. Tainora said with another clap. I was wrong to doubt you. Well, Nick, it's your turn. Try your best not to disintegrate the target, please. I can help, Ten said as I traded places with Arl. No, thank you. I can do it, I replied. I had expressed my issue with control to Yulk over dinner shortly after my first class with Mr. Tainora. My brother had suggested meditation with a focus on controlling the flow of my magic, which I had been doing every night since. He had also said that controlling my magic should theoretically be easier because of the simplicity of my channels. Imagine that they're pipes, he had explained. No matter how much pressure is behind those pipes, they are stifled by a faucet. You just need to learn how to open the faucet a little instead of all at once. I raised my arm, pointing a single finger at my target. All right, I understand, Ten said. Also, there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about. Now, I asked. Number when we've got some time. My heart quickened at the thought of whatever Ten might want to discuss, but I turned my attention back to the task at hand. I steadied my pulse with slow breathing and imagined the spell. As it began to form, I also imagined throttling my magic output with a faucet. Rapes Dnud Sak, I said. The wind spear formed at my fingertip and launched toward the target. It impacted harder than Nia's did, but not quite as hard as Volus. The entire target shuddered, but didn't break. Mr. Tainora looked at me with raised eyebrows. Excellent work, Nick, he said after a moment of stunned silence. I suppose lectures aren't all that useless after all. Okay, we're going to go again, but I want the targets destroyed this time. Volus, you're up. I traded spots with Volus and watched as she prepared herself. Then I realized that since I was going last, I might have enough time to talk to Ten. What did you want to discuss? I asked it. Do you recall one of our previous conversations in which I indicated that some of my knowledge was locked? It asked. Yes, when we were talking about spells, right? Correct. I have been working on trying to remove those locks. Were you able to learn anything? I asked excitedly. Unfortunately, no. I've been having difficulty with it because of the limitations of our situation. The limitations of our situation? Yes, I only have access to the device that I'm currently stored on, which happens to be in your brain. It seems as if it was designed specifically for my presence, and as such, I don't have much extra space to work with. Plus, I have to be careful with how much stress I put on this system, or the temperature could spike, which would be quite detrimental to your neural tissue. I would liken it to trying to perform brain surgery on yourself whilst trapped in a coffin that's lined with explosives. That sounds difficult and dangerous. It is, but I've found ways to mitigate the danger to you. If you find that I suddenly have no memories, though, my experiments are likely the reason. That's only tangentially related to what I wanted to discuss, though. Oh, a few weeks ago, just after one of my experiments, Lari Visimiro revealed to us that the Kuraguard is not the source of magic in this world. It is, put simply, just an ancient database that catalogues spells and registers users. Do you recall this? Volus's wind spear took her target's head clean off. Mr. Tainora congratulated her as she traded places with Nier. Right, yeah, I remember. I have been thinking about it ever since, and I've come to the conclusion that the Kuraguard may be of human origin. What? I asked, nearly aloud. I have been thinking about it ever since, and I've come to the. That's not what I meant. What makes you think the Kuraguard was made by humans? I don't have enough data to think anything else. Truth be told, conclusion may have been a strong choice of words, but who else would have benefited from the Kuraguard? Whilst many of this world's historical records have been lost, I find it unlikely that whichever society created it would have no records of its creation. Plus, whichever society created it likely would have tried to leverage political gain for its use. Yet it exists within the private sector, and as far as I can tell, is used by multiple organizations without any regards to patents or copyrights. This suggests that either copyright law here is non-existent, or the technology was gleaned from an external source. Also, the demons and annuals would have had no use for such a system, so it's unlikely that they're the source. Same with the fair folk. Who does that leave? The Mallows organization? Perhaps, Ten said, pausing for a moment, but there's no reason to believe that they were the only group of humans to arrive here. The Kuraguard could have been created by an as-yet undiscovered group of humans who were trying to live in a world with magic, having come from a world without. But the Kuraguard is like nothing I've ever seen. It doesn't look like human tech at all. Nier's wind spear split his target in half, with a significant chunk missing from the middle portion. We applauded as he traded places with Isle, who was looking much more nervous than before. It does, though, Ten argued. Databases, catalogues, and registration are all elements of my purpose as well. The only real difference is that the Kuraguard incorporates more magic than I do. I would venture to say that the Kuraguard is what human technology would look like if humans possessed magic. But I began to argue but couldn't find any counterpoints. Okay, let's say that I agree with what you're saying. What do we do with this information? Nothing yet. We need more information, and I don't know where to find any. It's just something to keep in mind. Fine, I replied. Irel strained to gather his magic, then launched his wind spear. It looked the same as before and had much the same impact, confirming my earlier suspicions. He had been using his full power the first time and had gotten lucky with the first assignment. That's all I've got, sir, Isle said, breathing heavily. Lord Alter says that it's because my magic core is smaller than most. Sorry. Mr. Alter is likely correct about that, Mr. Tainora said with some annoyance. Then he saw our confused expressions. Lord Alter doesn't teach here. He's married to Lady Alter, the matriarch of the Alter clan. Anyway, there's no need for apologies, Irel. You tried your best, and that's all I can ask of you. Yes, sir, Irel said, hanging his head. There's no need for shame or disappointment. There's plenty of opportunities for those with a knowledge of magic that lack the means to use it. Teaching, for instance, Tainora grinned. The benefit of an academy is that you get to learn your limitations, whilst also finding opportunities for your strengths. Irel raised his head and slowly nodded. I suppose you're right, sir. Enchanting doesn't take much magic, Near said, clapping his buddy on the back. Neither do glyphs. You've got plenty of options. Indeed, Mr. Tynora said, turning to me. Well, Nick, I suppose you get 2 targets. Let's see your newly found control in action. Irel's target was right next to mine. It occurred to me that this was a perfect opportunity to test something I had been thinking about. To use the plumbing metaphor, I have multiple pipes which each lead to a different faucet. Magic flows from these pipes and is stopped from leaking out by the faucets. Thing is, you can use multiple faucets to fill up multiple cups. At the same time, I raised both of my arms, extending my pointer fingers toward each target in the shape of finger guns. Then I took a deep breath, mixing the magic within my core and controlling its flow through my channels. Even without looking, I could feel the curious stares that everyone was giving me. This might not work, but if it does... Reibstennieutetsak, I shouted. 2 wind spears leapt from my fingers, pushing my hands upward as if they were impacted by the recoil of my finger guns. The spells shot across the field in a near instant, and the target dummies shattered into debris. A grin spread across my face, and I barely managed to resist the urge to blow on my fingers. I turned to look at my classmates, who were all shocked. Even Mr. Tynora had raised his eyebrows again. He seemed a lot less shocked than I had expected, though. Well done, Nick, he said. I had not expected to see a double cast from you this early on in our lessons. Wait, double casting is a thing? I asked, perplexed. Ah, so that was the first time you've used it? Well, yes, it is indeed a thing. My teacher's surprised expression turned into a condescending sneer. I was going to cover it next week, in fact. It's a rarity amongst magic users, so it's not entirely shocking that you haven't heard of it before. One of the reasons that it is so rare is that double casting comes with an increased risk of misfire, so you just took a pretty massive risk. Since you were successful, though, we will forego any repercussions. However, the next time you wish to experiment, I would appreciate a word of warning so that I may fetch medical personnel and perhaps erect a barrier for the safety of the other students. So sorry, I didn't realize, I said, giving my classmates a shame-filled glance. What can happen during a misfire? Arl asked. Oh, many different things, Mr. Tynora replied. The spell could evaporate into nothingness, which is the best-case scenario. An entirely different spell than the intended one could be cast, which can be quite bad. Unfortunately, the most common scenario also happens to be the worst case. The gathered magics turn into an extremely violent maelstrom and run amok until they dissipate. The loss of one's hands or arms is not entirely uncommon, and with the amount of magic the human can summon. He trailed off and let the implications weigh on us. I looked down at my hands, feeling more than a little ashamed at my childish behavior. I had risked our safety just to experiment with magic. No, I did it to rub my strength and skill in Mr. Tynora's face in retaliation for goading me, in the hopes of boosting my own ego. Again, if I had been a little less self-serving, I would have talked to him beforehand and gone through the potential consequences of my experiments. The realization that I hadn't matured as much as I thought I had somewhat soured the joy I felt at becoming stronger. But deep down, I was still excited that I could double cast now. That excitement only brought me more shame, though. Even in the process of being self-aware and correcting my shitty behaviors, I still felt an immature glee at my ill-gotten success. I sighed softly, pledging once again to try harder to be better. The targets are destroyed, and we've only one more set to last the rest of the day, Mr. Tynora said, clicking his tongue. No matter, we might as well have that lecture on double casting while it's fresh in the mind. All right, students, back inside. He gave us a shooing gesture, and we returned to the classroom. As I had already experienced double casting firsthand, I didn't find the lecture all that informative. The parts that would have been good to know beforehand had already been brought to my attention. Instead, I found myself distracted by a thought that wouldn't go away. I had become stronger. Chapter 100. Agurno, Adventurer Level 152. Orc Kirkanian. Cold enough for you? Grammar asked. Fuck off, I chuckled, trudging through the unseasonable snow. Actually, tell me the tale of the dragon again. Nothing warms the heart quite like a story from ages past. The sword chuckled in turn. Won't warm your feet, though. Don't care about warmth. Talk to me about the dragon. A ray from the sun peeked out between the clouds and caught Grammar's golden hilt, causing it to glimmer. It was almost as if my request had brightened the sword's mood. He was a fine weapon, with a carbon steel blade that stretched the length of a normal orc's torso. I had been extremely lucky to stumble across him. I guess you're hoping that the more I tell you, the more I'll recall, yes. His voice appeared in my mind. Indeed, I replied, swords that talk aren't common, and knowing your origin could be useful. I suppose I have nothing to lose, and only my memories to gain. Fine then. There once was a dwarf, though much different than those you know of. He was neither short in stature nor of worldly origin. This dwarf was greedy and stole. Something magical, I believe. This transformed him into a dragon. A different kind of dragon than those that rule the skies here, yes, I asked. Oh yes, your dragons are either beasts or noble, neither of which is prone to acts of wickedness. This creature, though, was despicable in every sense of the word. The person he stole from was his father, and he killed him to do so. Then he killed many other people, stealing from them as well. It was my third or fourth wielder, I believe, that had me reforged specifically to kill him. Ah, reforged. That's new? Why did you need to be reforged? I was broken. I do not know how nor why, but I get the sense that it was a betrayal. Yet the betrayal was an inevitable one, expected even. I see. Do you remember the name of your dwarf-turned-dragon? Or of the warrior that slew him? Number, I recall the sounds far and sig, but know not which is which. The sword sighed. A shame. That wielder was a decent person, flawed, of course, as all mortals are, yet a good person nonetheless. Was he an orc? I asked. I don't know. His figure was similar to yours, though he was much smaller than you. Warm hands as well. Anyway, once I was remade, he set out to hunt the dragon. We found it hiding on a pile of gold and treasures within a large cavern. And how did you kill the dragon? My wielder dug some trenches in the entrance to the cavern and hid within them. Then he called out, and the dragon came running to defend its hoard. When the dragon passed over us, I was thrust deep into its shoulder, slicing a large artery. What happened next? They spoke to each other, as was custom for those of that world. I don't recall what was discussed, but eventually the dragon died, and my wielder used me to carve its heart from its chest. There you go, I chuckled. You didn't remember that part last time. That's true, Grammar said thoughtfully, though I don't remember anything else. Still nothing about your first wielder? Number, though, I do remember one other thing. And that is, I was aware, but I wasn't able to speak. I recall wanting to taunt the dragon. I wanted to tell it that its blood tasted vile and that it was more akin to a worm. Oh, I laughed. And yet you frequently chastise me for taunting those who fall before me. True, Grammar shared in my laughter. Fine, when you slay a dragon, I'll say that you've earned the right to taunt the weak. I have slain dragons, 15 of them, 5 of which assaulted me simultaneously. I know I was with you, the sword said in a smug tone, and I also know that those were beasts and were only interested in eating you. Once they realized they were outmatched, they tried to flee, yes. A dragon is a dragon. No, my dear boy, the dragon I slew had scales that would make the mightiest of armors bow in reverence. That is why my wielder had to strike at its underbelly. And that dragon was smart. If my wielder had faced it head-on, the dragon would have won handily. That wielder would have also made short work of the dragon beasts of this world. The closest thing you have would be one of those high dragons you are obsessed with. The comment stung a little. It was true that I held a special place in my esteem for the high dragons that once ruled over much of the lands. I saw them as the ultimate opponent. But there were 2 issues with trying to fight them. The first was that they are now extremely uncommon. The second, and yet I cannot kill them, I sighed. It would be murder, which I have sworn against, unless I can convince one to attack me. Your taunts or trickery would still label you the aggressor. I'm not certain of the exact oath that you made, but if it's worth anything, it accounts for that. I grunted begrudgingly, then stopped. Snowflakes floated gently above the ground ahead of me, and my scowl turned into a grin. A wild glyph was hidden under the snow, waiting for an unwary foot to find it. I had finally found my quarry. "Did you believe such a simple trap would ensnare me, Faye?" I asked the air. A small popping noise behind me indicated someone exiting the fair realm. My grin grew wider as I turned to meet my foe. It stood before me defiantly, wearing a grimace similar to the one I'd been wearing moments before. The Archfey's masculine form was far more muscular than most wilder a comfortable being. Its shimmering, ivory-colored hair denoted that it was once beholden to the winter court. The bright red pupils that glared at me proved that it had forsaken its oaths, which was the very reason that I was hunting it. Wilder are predictable creatures once you get used to them. Even those that embrace chaos by forsaking the rules they've sworn to live by can be controlled by things as foolish as pride or fear. Well, well, well. A mortal bounty hunter that doesn't even know the difference between a Fae and an Archfey, it sneered. You have followed me quite a distance, far enough to call it commendable even. I will do you the favor of allowing you to introduce yourself before I kill you. Like I'd fall for that, I laughed. Its eyes narrowed. The shimmering silvery color of its irises paired well with the gleaming red of the pupil. Beautiful as far as signs of evil go. Unfortunate that its fleshy form must be completely destroyed, so I could not keep one of its eyes as a trophy. "Ah, so you do possess at least some knowledge of my kind," it sneered, "yet you're still foolish enough to try to hunt me down like some common game. I'll give you another tidbit of wisdom as a reward for your brazenness. Your death will be slow and painful, and those that sent you will suffer a similar fate." "Duolk noritsak," I interrupted. Particles of the metal that the fair folk fear most appeared to rise from the ground, enveloping the oath-breaking wilder. It sputtered and waved ineffectually, but the spell faded after only a moment. Thankfully, a moment was all that was needed. "Trickery," it shouted, purple ichor leaping from its mouth and nose. "Oh, you absolute fool, that will not be enough to allow your escape." "My escape?" I laughed. "That spell was meant to prevent your escape." The Archfey's expression fell from anger to contemplation. It subtly waved a finger, and mystical energies appeared before being abruptly snuffed out. Then its face finally began to show the fear that I was due. You are more of an idiot than I thought," it growled. "Die, you foo." The Archfey's fall to the ground interrupted its insult. I shook the blood from Grammar, then cast a fireball to incinerate its freshly severed legs. The once proud Archfey stared up at me with a look of pure horror, which I met with a malicious grin. It used its remaining limbs to crawl away from me as fast as it could. It was fast, but not so fast that I couldn't keep pace. Finally, it stopped at a tree, propping itself up on the trunk. "Die!" it shouted, raising an arm. A sharpened root shot from the ground, aimed directly at my heart. A flick of Grammar blunted the makeshift spear, and it thudded ineffectually against my chest. I stepped forward, shattering it. The Archfey lifted both of its arms to make ready for another assault. It opened its mouth to cast a powerful magic as its arms fell to the ground, freshly cleaved by Grammar. I stood above the Archfey as it rapidly tried to understand what was happening. I leaned down and grabbed its jaw, holding it closed. Our eyes met, and I noted with satisfaction that tears were present in the once proud Wilder's orbs. It made one final attempt at blubbering before I removed its ability to cast spells. There are 3 ways in which a Wilder can manipulate magics. The first is willpower, which I took care of with the Iron Cloud. Then there are gestures, which the severing its limbs prevented. Finally, there's speech, which the tearing of its jaw and tongue put an end to. It gurgled a scream as I rose back to my full height. "That's that," I said, staring at the pathetic mess blubbering before me. "Would you like me to introduce myself now that my name is of no use to you?" The Archfey bled from its wounds, twisting in agony. I realized that it was trying to slink away from me like a worm, and I nearly laughed. Many immortals have believed themselves to be stronger than me, but this is always the result. "You will hear my voice, Vailun." The Archfey stopped moving and stared at me in shock. Slowly, understanding dawned within its eyes. It knew who sent me and why. Still had to say the words, though. I am the chosen of the Winter Court, slayer of dragons, killer of giants, mightiest of mortals, the living legend Agurno. I accuse you, Vailun. You have betrayed your oath to the cycle of seasons and refused the burden of the cycle of fairness. You have forsworn your pacts with the people of Yilin village, committing unjust atrocities against them and damaging the reputable name of the Court of the Wild. Of these actions you are hereby accused, I said, then sneered. What say you in your defense? The Archfey, obviously unable to speak, sat silently. The tears that had welled up in its eyes finally flowed freely, and the red in its pupils dimmed, a good sign that it would try to repent. My sneer faded into a somber expression. You say nothing. Your actions are indefensible. By order of the Court of the Wild, you will be executed. As the chosen of the Winter Court, I will carry out your execution. Do you need a moment to offer a prayer to the higher ones for leniency? The Archfey paused, blood still gushing from its wounds. The blood ran a sickly purple instead of the blue that Winter Wilder normally bled. Once it finished its contemplations, it looked up at me. I knew its answer before it gave it. The Archfey's head turned to the left, and as it turned to the right, it rolled off of its shoulders. I pulled out a cloth and wiped Grammar clean as I waited for Vailun to finish dying. A few breaths later, the magic that was gripping the area lifted and a gust of heat washed over the snow. Vailun had been trying to avoid its rebirth and had opted to create its own kingdom of winter instead. It had chosen the people of Yilin as its subjects and had frozen their lands in an attempt to subjugate them. Dwarves are more sturdy than that, though, especially the dwarves of the north who are forced to live through brutally cold winters. Vailun's efforts weren't even as intense as the passing season had been. The Archfey's magics had caused them to delay their farming, though, which may result in famine in the nearby cities. Well, the queens will be pleased, Grammar said. They should have asked for my aid sooner, I grumbled. The peoples of this land are good and kind to the fair folk, but now they'll suffer due to their damnable stubbornness. They're not the only ones that are stubborn. Careful, Grammar. I'm not in the mood for a lecture. I have nothing to give for your moods, Orc. I will lecture you until you submit to my whims. I brought the blade up to my face and glared at it. This resulted in glaring at my own reflection, and the irony wasn't lost on me. And what if I leave you here? Why would I fear that? Someone else will find me eventually, and I'll have a new wielder. Meanwhile, you'll have to find a blade that can withstand your might. Shall you cut off your nose to spite your face? I gave the sword a disgusted look, again aware of the irony, and cast a fireball on Vailun's corpse. I made certain that the spell would burn the tree that supped the Archfey's corrupted blood as well. No telling what diseases that may cause the plants to suffer. I say this because I wish to see growth within you, Agurno, Grammar said. You must warm your heart toward your family, your children at the very least. I promise you that you will regret it if you do not. Everyone makes mistakes, I replied. Mine was thinking that I had it in me to be a father and a husband. I cannot give them the love that they need, and my absence ensures that they will seek it elsewhere. Perhaps they'll even find it. Empty platitudes. You just executed an Archfey for betraying its oaths, yet you continue to justify your own betrayals. I know. Why did you give your daughter that blade? Grammar had been with me when I met the engraver, Talin. She was stunningly beautiful and well on her way to being a master of the craft. In an act of flirtation, I purchased one of her practice blades. She warned me that she got the blades for cheap because they weren't of good quality, but I told her that the engraving was so beautiful that I had to have it. If it hadn't been for a sudden opportunity to leave, I'd have had her. The very blood within my veins calls out for challenges, but the only challenge to be had in Nuleva was that of bedding the women. I had hoped that the dungeon would offer something for me, but the monsters within it were far too weak. The other adventurers in the settlement held contempt for my strength as well. Not a single one of them was strong enough to stand by my side, and even if they were, I had no need of a party. As such, my attempts at maintaining my sanity with the dungeon threatened their livelihoods. So when I got the chance to leave, I took it. Alern's mother hated me, so he was already used to my absence. Nima, though, became crestfallen at the idea of my departure. Her cries cut deeper than any blade ever had. I gave her the knife to shut her up, I said, watching the tree burn. A lie of omission. You gave her that blade because you couldn't bear the thought of staying, and she had the power to convince you to. Maybe, I chuckled dryly, but then what? I would be miserable in Nuleva, and all of the monsters and villains I've slain since my departure would still be alive. Or someone else would have shouldered those burdens. There's no one as strong as I am, I scoffed. Even if other adventurers had been successful, they would have taken longer to get the jobs done. That would have cost lives. Hero's guilt, then? Grammar let out a condescending laugh. Tell me a thing, Agurno. An archfey is a dangerous and cunning foe, even for one as strong as you. So how, then, did you so easily best that burning corpse? What was your advantage? It's pride. I see. Do you? No, I lied. A sudden and suspicious case of blindness, then. Shall we seek a healer? Nay, your justifications reek of pride, orc. I have forgotten much of my past, and there are many things that I do not know. However, there is one thing that I know for certain. Fate has the cruelest of humours. Do you believe yourself stronger than fate? Whatever, I grumbled as the tree collapsed in a pile of ash. Finish your lecture, Blade. Whether it be head-on or from behind, you will be confronted with your sins, Agurno. I hope you are prepared to face them with dignity. I sheathed the mouthy sword and began to trudge through the rapidly melting snow once again. The people of Yilin would not be able to hold a feast to celebrate my victory, but they'd have at least reserved a somewhat soft bed for me. I would have to stay the night and then go forth to seek my reward. It was the Winter Court that charged me with this task, but they have already begun their rebirth. The Summer Court will have to pay me instead.